things evolve, business evolve. I think officials have good governance there. Getting back to organization or journeys or anti-treatment centres, I've engaged with experiences, and I asked them mostly, asked them, the question, absolutely surprised that the vast majority, absolutely any legalization of cannabis, and it cited the harm. Well,
question.
I just no, I had cited the harm. Felt that had effect cannabis. People will be looking for kids under 18 would still be targeted, and I was surprised myself. And I think when we have a citizens' assembly, and I hope we have one as quickly as possible, all the views and your views, which are pertinent as well, will be brought to that citizens' assembly. But I can never forget my two those interventions, which I was quite surprised at, because there is a narrative out there to legalise and decriminalise, and I think we've gone a long way with the, as I said, the national drug strategy, reducing harm, supporting recovery, and a health-led approach. And I think that's the right approach. And when you talk about the work in Portugal, effectively Portugal approach, as Eamon Keenan said, isn't compatible with the Irish legal system.
I need to move on, Gino.
Okay, thanks.
Bernard Dorkin is next.
Chairman, and I thank the Minister and his colleagues for coming before the committee this morning. And I find the conversation interesting. I should mention, as I've done before, that I was a member in a previous incarnation of a ministerial drugs task force and liaised with the community-based committees. I have to say at the outset, the debate that I listened to there about the need for legalisation of cannabis, I don't accept it at all. It is cannabis is a dangerous drug. It is also a gateway drug, and that has been proved beyond any shadow of doubt. It's also hallucinatory, and it is one of the drugs that's usually fed to kids deliberately in order to create a market for the people who supply that drug and more serious drugs. So we've all, as public representatives, dealt with situations of severe drug and or alcohol addiction. And as Roisin Shortall said earlier on, the theme is that we improve the situation for them, that the people on methadone be encouraged to come off drugs altogether and to stand. I know that Lynn is shaking her head there, but we all know a little bit about that. None of us have absolute control of the one and only solution. If there was a solution, we wouldn't have a drugs problem now. We still have. And I was involved in the Zurich experiment and the Amsterdam experiment and a number of other experiments in a previous incarnation as well. I have to say this, that they're still experimenting. We still have a drugs problem worldwide. It's not going away. And just as in the case of alcohol, one of the first questions is, can the person concerned accept that they have a problem? And then can they work with the authorities, the local voluntary authorities and the statutory authorities, or both, in order to get off the situation as it was. So I think that's the first thing. I think as well as that, we need to see, we have methadone. How many people are on methadone, by the way, at the present time throughout the country?
10,000, is it?
10,000. How has that number fluctuated? Sorry?
It's currently 11,500 people are on methadone or opiate agonist treatment. So that includes methadone and buprenorphine as substitutes.
And does that include the extra 1,000 that came on during the COVID crisis?
That includes the additional 1,000 people that have commenced since January 2020.
And are they progressing? For instance, can progress be recorded? There's nothing as bad and as debilitating to anybody who's trying to deal with the situation, and families who are trying to deal with the situation. And we have all dealt with them. And invariably, the mothers in families will come out on the hard line and say, okay, this has to stop. It can't go on forever. We have to improve the situation, reduce the level of dependency. And how can we do that? Are we doing the right thing now? And so I want to point out that, that's like everybody else. I, like everybody else, want to try to do the right thing insofar as dealing with the drug and alcoholism problem is. What do you say as minister and officials is the best way forward at this stage?
Again, the best way forward to me is the National Drug Strategy, which with over 20,000 submissions in 2017, we've had the midterm review, and again, it's a health-led approach. Look, Bernard, I grew up back in the 80s, and we had there wasn't a drug problem as such, but we had a drug problem. It was alcohol and tobacco, and we didn't deal with alcohol very well. And so, I think that the way we have to deal with these is destigmatizing addiction and working with all the various stakeholders and all the communities and address the reasons in many marginalised areas why these things happen. But I'll bring in Eamon if you want to ask.
Just before it comes in there, just to give an idea as to where I'm coming from, I think there's nothing as soul destroying is to deal with families who have a drug problem, which grows and grows and grows, and eventually tears the family apart. Makes that family, like the talk about the stigma. The stigma is as a result of continued reliance on particular drugs. And if we need to address that. We need to be able, methadone, the whole concept of methadone is to encourage people away from dependency on drugs. And the last point I want to make is this. It's been suggested that if you legalize the drugs, this was going to be up, everything's going to be okay. When prohibition was abolished in the United States, the use of alcohol increased by 3,500%. So, things don't change insofar as that's concerned. That's a factor, like. So my point is this: are we spending enough time addressing medically, psychologically, the issue of dependency on drugs, even the minor drugs, which are, as I've referred to, gateway drugs, and are proven and recognised as serious?
I'll refer to Eamon.
Yeah, just thank you, Minister, and thank you, Deputy Durkin. Just to comment on that point and to refer back to one of the questions which Deputy Shortall asked earlier, and Deputy Hurrihan was looking for information in relation to care planning of new entrants, which would include all those people who've been commenced on opiate substitution treatment in the last 2 years. Amongst new entrants, 74% of those people over the age of 18 have a care plan in place, and 86% of those under the age of 18 have a care plan in place. The target is 100% in all groups, and it's only through care planning that people can move forward and get the appropriate treatment and interventions, because the individual is involved in the development of the care plan themselves. The other thing I'd say, you're quite right, Deputy, in relation to the family support services, we've received additional funding to develop family support services to support those services who are suffering problems within the family, who are working with those families who are at that situation where they're dealing with a young person with a substance misuse problem. And I think that's an important issue to identify and support.
Welcome that. Thank you very much.
Next.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, good morning, everyone. I just want to confirm I'm here in Leinster House 2000. Minister, good morning, and thank you for being with our committee today, and thank you for the work you and your team are continuously doing. I just want to start off by referring to Bushy Park. It's a residential addiction support centre in Ennis. I know you've been in contact with them. I believe you visited there in the past, and you know, it's incredible what they've done. Throughout COVID and throughout the past 2 years as a TD, I've met with many people who've come out the other end, the success stories of Bushy Park. And you know, it's been there many years. Many people are back in the straight and narrow, off alcohol. They're avoiding their gambling addictions. You know, they're on a good pathway in life once more. And I want to pay tribute this morning to Margaret Nash, Jerry Murphy, and all the team that worked there. Minister, just so there's a new building going to commence in Bushy Park. That's very exciting, and that's been supported by government and funded by government. But there is a funding crisis, I think, across these residential addiction centres, Bushy Park being one of them. And I'm asking that you might now look at revising the block grant funding model that's currently dispersed via the HSE. So at the moment, it's based on bed nights, and you know, in a year that fluctuates, and particularly during COVID, when bed nights in non-acute services such as addictions and residential centres were reduced, a lot of these centres found their funding plummeting. Meanwhile, they sit at the same staffing levels, they sit at all the same overheads, and I think what this has shown us, it's not just a COVID problem, but year on year, centres like this have a budget that just isn't stabilised, and it makes it very, very difficult for them to plan going forward. The other issue I would say, Minister, along the funding line is that there is a real need for multi-annual funding. At the moment, there's an annual funding allocation made by the department. It's very, very, very difficult for Margaret Nash and her team to plan for what happens the year after that again. Yes, they're getting bricks and mortar, but in terms of expanding their programmes or looking at what they deliver and enhancing it, it's very, very difficult. Would you please respond to that, please, Minister, if you would look at revising the block grant model and introducing a multi-annual funding model to replace the current annual one? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy, and I'm looking forward to getting down to Bushy Park, and I've met Margaret Nash on numerous occasions, and I'm very aware of the great work that they have been doing. I'm going to talk to bring in Eamon Keenan and Jim Walsh regarding the funding, and you talked about the multi-annual funding that's very, very needed.
Yeah, so currently we provide treatment for Tier 4 residential services based on treatment episodes. In other words, we get a block funding each year into the HSE, which has increased again last year to allow us to provide treatment episodes. That's what we look at, Deputy's treatment episode, for an additional 475 people in 2021. This is an area which needs ongoing and consistent funding, and I am aware of the work that Margaret carries out in Bushy Park. Obviously, our residential services have been impacted by the public health restrictions in relation to numbers of people who would be allowed in facilities, and I think we have to recognise that some of the facilities are old. They're not all purpose-built new swanky premises. They're old premises which have had to be adapted, and any funding that we can get in relation to that is welcome. But at the minute, it's treatment episodes that we fund on an annual basis.
If I could just interject there, and thank you for that, but that doesn't really take full account of what services like Bushy Park actually offer. I would have seen quite recently a log of the amount of phone calls they received, you know, from the September to Christmas period. They are absolutely inundated with calls from people screaming out for help at home, people who are at the cusp of relapsing and going back to the bottle, going back to the horse betting. So it's not all about treatment episodes and people actually being in there for the 28 bed stay period. That doesn't account for everything they do. Their costs haven't remained static. If anything, they've increased, but yet the funding model doesn't match that. This isn't just Bushy Park. There's an alliance of these centres throughout the country. I believe Margaret Nash actually heads up that alliance, but they are coming together as a group of centres to the department saying that the current model of funding just simply doesn't work. They're grateful for it, but it doesn't account for what they need to meet in terms of outlays each and every month. I've asked through the chairman of our committee that they would specifically come before our committee in the coming weeks, and I really hope that everyone can accede to that. We need to hear firsthand from Margaret, Jerry and others like that how they're really squeezed by the collar each and every month financially.
Sure. And we do meet with them and we would be very supportive of the work they do. I would just point out that I appreciate that they're getting a number of phone calls, but this is where the enhancement of community services will allow them to divert people to community-based services, because not everybody requires a residential treatment episode for a substance misuse problem, and they can avail of enhanced community services.
Okay, just to respond to that, Jerry Murphy is the treatment manager in Bushy Park, and being who he is, and he's a very kind, compassionate man, he's not going to tell somebody who's in floods of tears that, you know, I'm qualified to talk to you, but I'm not going to talk to you today because I'm a bit, you know, tied up with other work. That isn't how he works. That isn't how anyone in the sector works. So with the greatest respect, I know you've given an answer there, but I don't think that's very real life. But that's not how these services work. People scream out in the hour of need. Sometimes it's 10, 11 at night when Jerry or one of his colleagues is about to go home. And I don't think the current funding model really grasps all of that. In my remaining time, Chairman, I just want to reference one more point. I've grown up in rural County Clare. I only in my lifetime have seen a handful of drug deals or drugs being passed from hand to hand. But since my election to the Dáil, I get the train to Houston Station and I cycle in and out the quays on a Dublin bike every day. I'm aware of the really good work, the compassionate work undertaken by Merchants Key Ireland. I'm aware of that, and there's really good quality care given inside that building. But I am appalled each and every day that I cycle past that building. I see drug dealers lurking around the corners like vultures, little packages of tinfoil, little white sachets of dope passed hand to hand in the pure open air. And it's wrong. And they know it's such a ready market. You have your addicts coming out the front door down the ramp and the dealers waiting to top up what they've been given on methadone, to top it up with the fully illegal drugs. And it's like a fox in a hen house. It's all wrong. And I think that we need to maybe look at that whole model, because it bothers me that the last audit that I've seen by the HSE said that up to 40% of those receiving methadone treatment are now receiving that treatment across a 10-year period. You know, Merchants Key Ireland is fantastic, and I don't want to take from that, but there is a need for a Garda presence. There has to be the hard law presence outside the building and the soft caring presence inside. But it bothers me that any person going through that door for treatment, for rehabilitation, they're like lambs to the slaughter when they come back out, because there's a drug dealer yet again waiting for them. And I just want to add, I suppose, to what others have said, there is a need for a national debate. Whether it's right or wrong, there is a need for a national debate on drugs, drug usage, and indeed the whole thing of decriminalisation, all of that. I'm not sure where I exactly sit in that, but there has to be a debate in it. Perhaps it's time to remove a layer of criminality from it and bring, you know, health services further into that realm. We certainly don't want to become a gateway for all sorts of drugs, but that debate needs to happen. I believe our committee should lead it out. Maybe the Minister might respond on the Merchants Key issue that I've referenced, the fact that they're getting the methadone treatment within the building, but they're back out into the streets, you know, at the full mercy of drug dealers when they're back out there. And I would ask Minister, sorry, before I conclude, today, I would ask you as Minister to speak with the highest people in Garda Síochána to ensure that there is a constant policing presence around that. We're not there to judge the addicts, the people receiving treatment, but by God, we have laws in Ireland that enforce that bring criminal justice to the whole realms of drug abuse, and that needs to be enforced at the doors of that building. Thank you.
Again, just before the Minister comes in, I think it's a bit unfair just to identify one particular building where there's rehabilitation going on. I think it's a problem right across a number of
but Chairman, with the greatest respect, we don't need to sanitise this, Chairman. It's a point I've made. I've made it within the confines of this building, and it's something that's happening. Okay. So if we fluff over it, we're denying it's happening. I see it every day with my own eyes, and I'm happy to reference it.
Can you let me finish?
And I know it's happening elsewhere.
Can you let me finish?
Chairman, if I may, in a point of order, I think it's highly inappropriate to name one particular drug treatment centre where there may be certain activities outside.
Yeah, I was trying to make...
I think it's an abuse of this committee to actually use this committee for that purpose. I think it's totally wrong, and I really believe that the conversation should be withdrawn.
Chairman, I will not withdraw it, because this is the problem with drugs in Ireland. We fluff over time and time again. We're about supporting the addicts. We're about supporting the health realm.
I think
can you stop talking, please? I'm in the chair.
Outside the building, you know.
Are you going to stop talking?
It's the complete abuse of the committee, Chairman.
Martin, can you let me chair the meeting, right? I'm making the point that there's a difficulty in a number of centres in relation to where there's supports for people who are trying to get rehabilitation. It's not just one. You know, it is wrong to identify one building. If you're talking in terms of you're going from Euston Station, you only have to go up the boardwalk. It's all around Dublin. Like if anyone opens their eyes, they'll see drug dealing going on in many areas. And unfortunately, it's also outside of many drug rehabilitation centres, and that's wrong. And your call for the Gardaí to respond to this criminality is correct. But I think it's wrong that we should identify one specific building. Minister, would you want to come in there?
Before the Minister responds, I have, from the very get-go, been highly complimentary.
Hold on. Do you want me to cut
the team, the people in Merchants Quay. Look, I don't care if you want to.
I don't care what you're saying.
I don't mind.
I'm cutting you off now.
I know what I see, and
I know, and you're grandstanding now at this stage. Minister, do you want to come in?
I think Deputy Crowe, has articulated a point, but it tells us now that there is a huge need for a supervised injection facility at Merchants Quay. It is the subject of a Board Panola planning permission, and the sooner that we can get a supervised injection facility, a pilot medical supervised injection facility, I think it may help some of those issues. But there are issues that are within the Gardaí, and I'm fully supportive of the government decision to establish this medical supervised injection facility. And again, it's a key action in the National Drug Strategy.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm moving on to Senator Lynn Rowan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I need to preface this with saying, with all due respect, I think the last 45 minutes, especially of this meeting, has been one of the most excruciating things I've ever had to listen to when we speak about drug use in Ireland. I actually can't believe I'm hearing it in 2021. There's a lot more after being said wrong this meeting in the last 45 minutes than the name of a building in the city centre, and not anybody picked up on that and intervened, such as myths being put forward on gateway drugs, the language that has been used, the moralisation of people's drug use and whether they stay on drugs, don't stay on drugs, that everybody needs to become abstinent. What I don't understand what's after happening here today, Minister, is your statement says, let me be clear, a war on drugs is not an effective response to drug use. Now, the last 45 minutes of this conversation will tell me that we have just watched the complete opposite of that statement. Minister, the war on drugs has happened right in front of your eyes here today, and I'd like people to sit back and watch back this conversation of what they've just listened to today. The war on drugs costs lives, it's discriminatory, it's moralistic, it's a breach of civil rights, it criminalises poverty. If you want to focus on drug use, you need to forget the type of drug that's being used, and you need to look at poverty and marginalisation. Everything that this government has got to say into end poverty and make poverty criminalised. Criminalise poverty, not people for their drug use. But what I've seen here today is every single trope in the anti-decriminalisation and the war on drugs handbook. Minister, I need you now to explain to me what you mean by, let me be clear, a war on drugs is not an effective response to drug use. Because I have not witnessed that in this conversation.
Well, thanks very much, Senator Rowan. And look, I appreciate your intention is very well meaning. And we have said the war on drugs, that it hasn't worked, and that's why we brought in National Drug Strategy in 2017.
Not why we brought in the National Drug Strategy. The National Drug Strategy has been around for a long time.
Yeah, in 2017, and we've had a midterm review.
No, it's this version. The war on drugs is criminalisation. Do you understand that that's what that means, the war on drugs? Is it a reference to criminalisation?
My own view is I don't believe that. I think, again, we were trying
to believe. As a politician, right, that stands over policy, do you understand that the war on drugs is about the criminalisation of people who use drugs? Do you believe drug users are criminals?
No, what I think is that we need to destigmatise issues around people who use drugs.
It's not about stigmatisation, Minister. I'm going to have to keep bringing the basics here.
I haven't.
Drugs is an American. It came through the UN treaty. If you go back right to the 70s, to your own party, the Fianna Fáil party, you will see the conversation of what the war on drugs means, where the Drugs Act came from, the UN treaty and the single act, and where it actually originates from the war on drugs, which is prohibition and the criminalisation of people. We're not window dressing anymore. It's not a cosmetic thing. We just need to end stigmatisation. That's not what the war on drugs means. So I'm not going to allow the war on drugs as an effective response go out in news articles today where people actually got hope in that statement to then come on here today and listen to what we've just listened to. Do you believe that people who use drugs are criminals?
I think people who use drugs, they have human rights, and they are, we've met Syria, the service users' rights in action, and look, we've said that a health diversion is required, and it's compassion, not punishment. And I think we're moving in the right direction with justice.
You can't uncouple criminalisation from health-led and try to offer them up as two separate things. They are intrinsically linked. We do not reduce harm, increase happiness, unless we actually stop labelling and criminalising people for their drug use. Now, excuse me, Bernard, I didn't interrupt you.
No, you didn't, but you showed dissent. You showed dissent.
Can you, Bernard, can you give the speaker the floor?
The working group set up had nearly 22,000 submissions to it in relation to decriminalisation. The evidence was overwhelming to that working group on decriminalisation. The committee ignored it on the basis that we're not Portugal. Can you tell me, Minister, from that committee, was the main conversation that actually the guards didn't want to give up their powers to stop and search?
That's a legal issue and it's a justice issue.
And we are politicians and we make legislation. As a legislator, do you realise that the situation is in relation to stop and search powers?
Well, I think, seeking to normalise drugs, and it has, So
it's not about normalising drugs, it's about people, and it's about what they do in their lives, their agency, their supports, their networks. It's about not excluding them from society because of their choice to take drugs. It's about fixing the poverty and inequalities in communities so that we don't have chaotic drug use. But your statement was very strong, Minister. So much so I text you this morning to thank you for such a strong sentence in this. And now what I realise here today is actually the war on drugs is an effective response from your view because we will stand over criminalisation.
Well, effectively, you take one statement out of a statement, but look,
it's very important. It's a very important statement. It's a very important sentence, Minister.
In health, we don't favour criminalisation. We want to support people. And again, I say,
in health does not favour decriminalisation. So, are you saying that health supports and stands over the criminalisation of people for their drug use?
No, we do not favour criminalisation, but what we have is a health-led approach, and that's the approach.
We don't have a health-led approach because we condemn people for their drug use.
Well, it's not a black or white issue.
No,
it's a health-centred approach, and sometimes justice.
Point of order, Chairman.
Is an adequate strategy.
I'm not taking a point of order, Bernard. Let the session finish, please.
Minister, I know I'm coming in hard here, but you have to remember, right? This is an issue that I don't go and visit a treatment centre and ask them a question like, do they support legalisation? What I do is I ask my friends, do they think that they're criminals? I ask my family, I ask the father of my child, is he a criminal for his drug use? He'll tell you no. I don't go and ask him, do you think drugs should be legalised? You have to be careful of the questions that you ask people that have grown up in poverty and addiction, who have internalised that stigma that you speak about, that actually feel, oh no, they shouldn't be legalised because we buy into the moral panic. But we don't talk to them about the conditions of environment in which they live, in which they grow, why they have to self-medicate to that extent. There's a difference between drug use and drug abuse is connected to poverty and it's connected to inequality. And unless we can address that, We can't keep having these pretend conversations at committees where we say big statements like the war on drugs is not an effective response, and then have a committee that is in complete contradiction to that statement. And I think you should withdraw that statement from that sentence from the statement that you gave to the committee today.
Well, I think
Should there be a war on drug barons? Should there be a war, Chairman, on drug barons, the people who supply the market?
Well, then legalise. Well, then legalise, and then you'll remove that. Let's have the conversation on legalisation. We gave them the market. We gave drug dealers the market.
look, I'm confident in Ireland's approach, and look, it's evidence based, and
it's not evidence based. The working group ignored the evidence that was presented to her on criminalisation. It ignored the evidence. So don't tell me that this policy is evidence based. It was one of 3 scenarios put forward, and it wasn't the one that had the most evidence at it.
Well, look, we have different opinions here.
No, mine is not. It's not an opinion. It's not an opinion.
Well, I believe it is an opinion, and it differs from others' opinions. But effectively, it's important that I think we live up to responsibilities. I think if we were starting out today, would we legalise alcohol, tobacco, and things like that? So there's a huge. I think the consequences of drug use.
That's health-led approach is a prohibitionist, and would also have that discussion about all of. So we've a prohibitionist drugs minister.
No, I think it's a compassionate approach that we have, and
it's the opposite.
And I think one thing you're right though, we have to acknowledge social determinants of drug use, and I agree with you there. We might take different paths, but I agree with you there that there are social determinants in drug use as well.
Okay, I've come to an end of this session. Martin Conway is next. Senator Martin Conway.
Yeah, Gormaga, Chairman, and I'd like to obviously thank the Minister and his team for coming in here today. And, you know, I listened to the engagement that Lynn had with the Minister, and you know, there's a lot on both sides that people have to listen to. And you know, I suppose my line of questioning today was going to be on, and I was going to highlight a report that was done in the Justice Committee when I was a member of the Justice Committee, because unfortunately, a lot of society and a lot of countries still see the problem with drugs as being a justice-led, whereas in actual fact, it needs to be a health-led. And I do believe that we are slowly but surely moving in that direction in this country. When David Stanton was chairperson of the Justice Committee, we went to Portugal. We looked at what was being done in Portugal. We engaged with various stakeholders in Portugal. And, you know, we learned in Portugal that there had been a significant reduction in the amount of drug abuse and drug use in Portugal because it was decriminalised. Now, I believe that there's a significant difference between legalising it and decriminalising the use of it. And I think that's a very, very important point. And I do think it's a difficult discussion. And I do think there are elements within society that are totally against this discussion. But I do believe it's a discussion that has to continue and has to evolve. And I do also believe that slowly but surely, you know, the whole issue of addiction is now coming under the realms of health. And, you know, we're here today. It is the Health Committee. And we are discussing this issue. And it is absolutely appropriate that it should be discussed as the Health Committee, as opposed to Justice. I don't think there's anybody on this committee that wants to see somebody who has addiction problems ending up inside Mountjoy or below a Limerick prison because of their addiction. And absolutely, we have a major job of work to do as a society in terms of the circumstances that lead people to addiction. I mean, there is unbelievable poverty in this country. There are areas of this country, whether it is urban or rural, where the level of poverty is absolutely appalling. And it is an absolute shame on our society that successive governments for decades have allowed that type of poverty to exist and continue and, if you like, evolve and get worse. And until such time as we deal with the environments that these people, young people, their families find themselves in, until we actually deal with that environment in the first place and ensure that people who go to school actually have access to proper equality and access to proper respect, we are going to have these problems. And whether it is cocaine or whether it is cannabis or whatever it is, there are people out there who will peddle these substances on vulnerable people. What I have a major issue with is the professional classes, the people who've had the opportunities, the people who've benefited from education in this country, that are going out at weekends, going into nightclubs and house parties and so on, taking cocaine. They are the people who have the knowledge and who have the benefit of everything that's good that our society, their families and our communities have offered. And yet they are operating and taking recreational drugs. And unfortunately, Chairman and Minister, it is tens of thousands of young professional people who have had every advantage that are doing it. These are the people who are supporting the drug barons, the Keenahans of this world that are bringing in drugs and making tens and hundreds of millions out of it. So I suppose my question to the Minister is, what are we going to do in terms of educating, or at least using the education system to educate these people that actually their actions are resulting in organised crime, in criminality, and they are supporting an underworld that most of them would criticise in their day jobs and work against in their day jobs. Because I was engaged at one stage with a group in Blanchardstown, Think Before You Buy, and we had meetings with the Garda Commissioner and previous ministers and so on in terms of funding a campaign. Think before you buy drugs. Think before you use drugs on a recreational basis. Think of the consequences of what happens. So I suppose that, and also, Minister, I'd just like to ask you as well about the HSE drugs and alcohol helpline and the funding that has been given to that. I believe that that is money very well spent. What are the plans in terms of developing that helpline, and what is the breakdown in terms of people who have suffered from alcohol abuse and people who suffer from drug abuse? Is it 50-50? Is there more people calling it who suffer drug addiction as opposed to alcohol addiction?
Thanks very much, Senator Conway. Just look, we're very, very aware. I think you articulate very well that the impact of drug in disadvantaged communities has been hugely significant, and I just want to pay tribute to the role played by the task forces in responding. I think the government, and I can assure you the government is committed to a joined up departmental approach to addressing substance misuse, but also I think task forces have a very important role in coordinating the responses of the agencies at the local level. You went on to say about, I think there's a debate there, we cannot be contradictory, the same people who are complaining about drug lords and drug abuse and drug use, they're probably taking recreation, cocaine or cannabis, and, we all have responsibilities. I might ask, I just want to say about the helpline. The helpline is accessible Monday to Friday from 9:30 to 5:30, and the figures have been quite huge. It showed a doubling of the number of calls from 2011 to 2020. So it is another, I suppose, helpline, and it's an assistance. If any of my colleagues, Eamon Keenan or Jim Walsh, want to comment on those, I don't want to be too happy.
Thank you, Minister. Just a couple of comments. I suppose the issue around prevention is a really important issue, and that's why one of the strategic priorities following the midterm review is around strengthening the prevention of drug and alcohol use and the associated harms among children and young people. And to that end, Know the Score needs to be rolled out within our secondary school system. So this is the first senior cycle resource which was developed that addresses the topic of alcohol and drug use. That was launched in 2019. Training for teachers began in January 2020, and 70 teachers were trained face-to-face, but that had to be paused due to the COVID pandemic. I think that since its launch, we've sent out 800 copies of Know the Score to schools, but we really do need to get back to the training of the teachers in this regard, because there is a key element to be played in relation to prevention. Around the helpline, the Deputy asked about figures. So in 2021, there was 4,400 contacts to the drug and alcohol helpline from people seeking support and help. Half of those, or 2,220, were in relation to alcohol, and half of them were in relation to drugs. The enhanced funding for the helpline will allow us to recruit additional staff members and expand the hours for the helpline to be available into the evening and maybe into the weekends as well. So that's to be welcomed. And it's also important to note, you made the point about cocaine and the use within society. We would hope that the initiatives which come towards us for funding in the upcoming call will address cocaine use in its broadest sense.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. Just out of curiosity, I'd like to know, what do you spend in terms of education? Have you run any education campaigns? Do we run any educational-based campaigns about the difficulties and the harm that drugs do in schools and colleges and so on? Because I think that's certainly, it should be an important element. So just in terms of education, maybe Eamon, you'd like to take that.
Sure.
If I come in just for a second, you know, there is the Know the Score, but also there's a Planet Youth, and you know, we have met with steering groups. It's an interesting idea that came from Iceland, and it's not included in the National Drug Strategy, but I think there's huge scope there with Planet Youth. Sorry, Emma, do you want to come in, or Jim?
So in terms of Know the Score, that's rolled out through the Department of Education to secondary schools. But on a regular basis, we have information on our drugs.ie website targeting young people, and we put particularly strong collaboration with the Union of Students of Ireland, and looking at resources available for all higher education institutes in this country. We think it's a really important element, and as you know, when we were looking at the opening up of society again in October of last year, we did produce information identifying the risks and harms that could be associated with substance use as the nighttime economy emerged. So it's an area, I think, that we're going to be focusing in on as the nighttime economy is opening up again. It's important to recognise that there can be risks associated with substance use, both alcohol and drugs, in that economy, and it's important that we address those both through our askaboutalcohol.ie and drugs.ie and the campaigns that we have developed in those regards.
Thanks very much. And just lastly then, a final quick question. In terms of, do you do any collaboration, Minister, with maybe counterparts in Northern Ireland, counterparts in England? You know, is there learnings? I mean, because I really believe that, you know, this is an international problem. Drugs, unfortunately, don't respect borders or boundaries. And, you know, we need to share knowledge, and we need to benefit from the exchange of knowledge. with our international counterparts. So have you developed any programs or any engagements with people, with ministers within Europe or in Northern Ireland or London, or is there any experiences or sharing of knowledge that you have benefited from or that you hope to benefit from?
Yeah, we have an international sector. We work very closely with the British Irish Council, and I chaired a meeting a few months ago of all the various jurisdictions, and it was really interesting because they have the same problems. Also, they have solutions, and I thought it was a very, very worthwhile collaboration. It's been ongoing, but I think we need to do a lot more because I think we've much more in common with maybe cities like Liverpool, Belfast, Glasgow, and London than maybe we have in other cities. So I think that collaboration is very worthwhile and probably needs to be enhanced.
Okay.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. John Lahart, thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Minister, and your officials for your attendance. And first, I want to acknowledge just the allocation last week that you announced in relation to dealing with crack cocaine. I know that's rolling funding. It's very much appreciated by the community I represent and the Drugs Task Force, the board of that, on which I sit along with the chairman of this committee. But I do want to focus in the short time. How many minutes have I, Chair? How many minutes have I, Chair?
10 minutes, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I do want to focus on the Tallaght piece, Minister, and you are familiar with the report that the Drugs Task Force in Tallaght produced, the landscape of substance misuse and its impact of the communities of Tallaght Drugs and Alcohol Task Force. Minister, if you were a representative of the area I represent, and in a Dáil speech I outlined when the 4 TDs for the area spoke, who are on the Drugs Task Force, that there's always a danger of stigmatisation of a whole community, and Tallaght is made up of such a blend and such a mix of communities, but I want to focus on this part of the community that's particularly challenged. So if I told you that the funding that Tallaght Drugs Task Force received in 2020 was roughly 1,200,000, and that in 2010 the figure it received was roughly 1,300,000. What would your response to that be?
Well, first of all, again, I'm glad that you kind of welcomed 850,000 initiative, and I hope that Tallaght, because they have, to me, a very, very powerful case to access that funding. Regarding, look, I commend the Tallaght Drug and Alcohol Task Force. They highlighted the problem through that very, very informative report, and it's also, you know, it's also an area that has intergenerational issues, as some families and children are caught up in a cycle of drug use and addiction and trauma and hidden harm. And I think that the drug use in Tallaght, I think the report outlined it, that I think we require an interagency response involving Garda Síochána and the Youth Service, the HSC, and local development community organisations. And I pay tribute again to the task force for the leadership and highlighting.
Okay, no, thanks,
issues.
Minister. But the question,
I'm coming back to your question now. Okay. Yes, that's okay, because I think we're within the 10 minutes. The 1,200,000. I'm going to ask my officials, but I suspect that there are other streams of funding coming from other agencies. But
I'm actually, so look, I do want to focus on this, and I suppose I'm not trying to grandstand you, Minister, but I do want to send a very strong message to you from the point of view of the preparation of next year's budget. Okay, so in 10 years, the funding to Tallaght Drugs and Alcohol Task Force from the Department of Health and the HSE decreased. Now, I welcome the recent allocation, but it's only a start, and I think that's the message that I have to get across to you.
Yeah.
If we look at where the Tallaght Drugs and Alcohol Task Force rates out of 14 in the funding of drugs task forces, it comes 8th. And that's not acceptable. And I'm saying that to your officials. You really, really need to look hard at this. Now, I have nothing against any other areas, but there's a figure that has really stood out at me over the last year. In 2020, from the Department of Health, Bray received nearly 575,000, and Tallaght received 336,000. Now, anybody who has just the barest knowledge of the impact of drugs on communities would find that figure startling. In 2020, from the HSE, Bray received almost 1 million, and Tallaght received just over 900,000. These figures have to be interrogated over the next year. They really do. So I'm asking you to, you don't have to respond to this now, but this is a theme that we're going to have to keep coming back to. The previous government, and I absolutely applaud it, the effort and resources that went into tackling drugs and the crime-related issue in Dublin's north inner city, we can only look on with in envy. Do you understand that, Minister? That the scale of the problem is no less in the community I represent and the chair represents, and yet the resources devoted to it are significantly less. And only politics can answer that. The scale of effort, background research that went into trying to tackle the issue of Dublin's north inner city, like I'm aware, that was driven from the Taoiseach's department. The amount of key people, some well-known people who've been drafted in over a period of time, some well-known sports people to assist in the challenge that Dublin's north inner city faces in relation to drugs. Again, we can only look on with in envy from the Tallaght perspective. When we look at the whole policing piece, and we look at, because from that report from the Tallaght Drugs Task Force, one of the key findings was just how normalised the issue of the selling of drugs and the whole kind of normalisation of drugs has become. And policing is certainly not part of criminalising this, but it's certainly part of addressing it, whether it's the wholesale, open, visible sale of drugs outside schools, outside shops. That's where the policing piece comes in. And yet, Dublin South Metropolitan Division, and I'd ask again for you to take this on board, in terms of the Gardaí personnel per 1,000, falls not just well short of other policing divisions in Dublin, never mind other counties in the country, falls less than half, in some cases, of the Garda provision in relation to other policing divisions. So if I have a plea with you today as Minister of State at the Department of Health, it is to ask you, and this is my question to you, what is stopping you and other ministers allied to this to adopting an approach, obviously one that suits an area like Tallaght, similar to the approach in Dublin's north, taken to Dublin's north inner city? What is stopping you from doing that?
Well, first of all, I have got an invitation to visit Tallaght, and I hope to and I will call out and visit as well. I think that we need to get, I said, the multidimensional approach, and we need to maybe work with the Taoiseach's department and many other departments to get, I suppose,
but will you champion that, Minister? Like, I'd love to see you as a colleague.
Well, I have championed, because since my introduction, I have got extra funding for the National Drugs portfolio, but also the fact that we got 850 million, of which I believe Tallaght to put in a very, very reasonable case, because it's a very, very difficult situation. I think they will be successful, but I can't determine that until I see the report coming in. I want to get back to the funding, and I very much welcome the invitation, and I've already been invited. I will call out, and we will sit down and try to address these issues. I'm going to bring in Jim Walsh regarding funding. Jim, you might be more aware of the funding streams, sir.
Yes, thanks, Deputy. You've identified a huge inequity, the allocation of the existing funding of the 28 million for task forces. It's not very fairly distributed, and that's why in the new €2 million in service enhancement fund, we have adopted a different model. We're calling it a population-based resource allocation model, which will allocate resources in a more equitable way to CHOs, and then within the CHOs, they will identify where is the population need. So we're not ring fencing only for this area or that area. We're saying find out where the need is and allocate the resources in that approach. Now, I think it will take some time to see the full benefit of the resource allocation model, but I think it will address then the issues you've raised about Tallaght, where there's been a population growth and a growth of drug use, and more resources need to be directed towards there. But I would say the new resource allocation model is a significant step towards favouring areas where there are emerging issues.
Thanks for that, Jim, and I want to acknowledge the role of the Minister in determining that. My time is running out, so there is an admission there that the model up until now has been unfair, not much use to the community I represent up until now. I hope it represents a continuing change in direction, and I want to acknowledge, Minister, your role in that, in the sea change in that approach, and also in relation to the additional funding, which is hugely welcome. But I want to finish on this and make a plea to you that funding deals with the end problem. Okay, it deals with the problem as it is manifesting. It doesn't deal with the root problem, and that's what the Dublin North Inner City funding approach. You know, the consultation that took place to see what were the needs of this community, and then they've gone about addressing it with funding, with personnel, with all the different multi-agency approach. Minister, I'd love to see you in tandem with the stakeholders and the community people in Tallaght say, look, let's reset this. I'm throwing funding at the problem, but let's look at the underlying issues that are causing this problem, because they need to be really significantly funded as well. Thanks, Chair, for allowing me a little bit of latitude there.
Yeah, and also just I commend again the Tallaght Drugs and Alcohol Task Force on that report, because now you have a roadmap of which we can follow, and that's of huge benefit to the department, but also across agencies. Okay,
I'd appreciate those comments too, Minister. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just follow on from that, Minister. You're saying in relation to, there was an informative report and so on, but the task force in the area will say that there's been no formal engagement, and there's been reports from Ballymun, Finglas. There's been other reports in relation to, particularly around the crack cocaine, but the challenges facing many communities. So, is there going to be some sort of formal structure that you're actually going to engage with people in relation to these reports?
Well, Chair, you've highlighted this issue on many occasions, and exactly what came out, yourself and Deputy Tallaght, and indeed Deputy Brophy, and many more have articulated, came out in the report. And again, I'm looking forward to calling out. I was hoping to call out before the Christmas. Unfortunately, I got COVID I was off for 3 weeks, and also we had the lockdown as well. So, but as quickly as I can, I want to go out and maybe meet to meet with you. And I'm assured that the government, is committed to, I think, a joined up approach, as you rightly said, Deputy Tallaght and Deputy Crowe. And again, I want to say the task forces, the role that they have played in coordinating effectively the responses at the local level, but also the report is very, very valuable.
Oh, it's just that, people are saying to me, and, my view as well, that I've never seen it as bad. The open drug deal, and, has been mentioned and so on. But I think for a lot of us, the whole idea of the amount of crack cocaine that's, people are being addicted to crack cocaine, I think that's the game changer that people are worried about. that the impact it's actually having on not only individuals, families, their children in those families, but also on communities. And again, just to go back to that report, while welcoming the 850,000 in relation to focusing down on cocaine and crack cocaine, the Tallaght report was talking in terms of €1 million, and I suppose that's the scale of the issue, the challenge that's in that particular area. You're talking in terms of maybe spreading that money over four or five, possibly more groups in relation to that. So when you break down that funding, it sounds an awful lot to people out there that are probably listening. But if you talk in terms of staff, and if you're talking about outreach to people that are addicted to crack cocaine, it's very, very small money. So again, you might look at that funding issue again. One of the changes that has probably happened in recent years is they're doing away with this whole idea of emerging trends. And I suppose one of the emerging trends in Tallaght and many of the other areas in Dublin, but also in Limerick, and it's probably going to be in other areas of in the state, is crack cocaine. So if there needs to be flexibility, within the task force themselves. That, and again, would you agree with this, that there needs to be a funding stream for task forces in relation to emerging needs that are impacting on their communities? So what is your view in relation to that idea of a particular fund set aside for emerging needs? Minister.
Thanks for that, Mr. Chair. And look, the report, The Landscape of Substance Misuse and its Impact on the Communities of Tallaght Drug and Alcohol Task Force, I think it highlighted that. But you talk about the emerging trends. I think in one aspect we have certainly tried to deal with emerging trends with the 850,000 over 3 years, and also 240,000 going to the CHO. But we had an emergency trend. There was a publication of Emergency Trends and Drug Checking Working Group in September, and there's huge analysis and it's evidence-based findings in the report. And I absolutely agree with you that we aim to strengthen yearly harm reduction and responses to the current and emerging trends and patterns of drug use. And I certainly feel this report and the fact that Tallaght and other areas with emergency trends, that it does fit in to what we're looking at, and also so I think that we have the data, and I'm looking forward to sitting down with all the various stakeholders in Tallaght, but not just Tallaght, in many other areas that you have these emerging trends, and to try to address them as best we can.
The disparity of funding, again, that needs to be looked at, Minister, in relation to that. I welcome the fact that you're starting to make those changes, but I suppose a lot of people just don't, and I've been on the task forces since they've been established. So I've seen a lot of changes, some positive, many of them positive, but I just still don't understand how this funding model that you've been using, how that comes about. So maybe you could do a note to the committee in relation to that. Similarly, with you talked at the start of the meeting about Mr. Walsh talked about new structures being established. Can you maybe send us on a note about how who's engaged in the discussions in relation to these new structures? Because again, we had a committee meeting in relation to Citywise we're in. They were concerned about the fact that the community element seemed to be done away with in relation to the new structures. I'm glad that now there's been a change there, but people that are involved in the drug task force don't really understand how these changes are happening. And Minister, again, they're not clearly involved in it. So any change at all needs to be, I think you need to be involving everyone in relation to those discussions. So I think that would be helpful. It's not unusual for people to attend A&E that are suffering from the side effects of crack cocaine or cocaine, for many are A&E. But I am aware of people in their 70s attending A&E. And I know there's a pilot scheme in Tallaght Hospital in relation to people who have difficulties in relation to addiction, that there's, they can be forwarded on the supports that are available in that area, and that's a pilot that's really working well in that area. But again, Minister, maybe that's something that you could look at for other areas outside of just the Tallaght area. The task force themselves, you mentioned the task force and how important they are. There's different pillars in relation to drug rehabilitation, and there's education, there's rehabilitation, so on. So it's really important, Minister, that around the task force table, and I suppose this is an old chestnut, that we have actually key people there. So it's important that the guards are there, the justice element are there, but it's also important that the local authorities are there, political voices there, but also it's important that the Department of Education, the voluntary section is there, but the other departments that are there. And again, would you look at that as a possible way forward? Originally, when we were talking about the task force being established, it was envisaged that you would have the various departments, and there seemed to be kickback then from various departments in relation to that. But if you're talking about people moving on in their lives, you need social protection there. You need someone from in relation to jobs. So all those elements need to be there, but they also need to have a voice, and they need to be able to be engaged. And I think that would, the work of the task force would be much more positive in relation to that. And again, that's a proposal I'm putting to you here this morning, Minister, and you might consider that. How do you envisage the 96 new community healthcare networks impacting on targeted funding when they're implemented in Sláintecare? Because again, we have this difficulty already with the, the CHO7. It's been mentioned already in relation to that funding, that, it's less funding than it was 10 years ago. How will this structure impact, and will that be a positive element in relation to funding, Minister, or have you any ideas in relation to that? You mentioned the 50 actions that were, the national, 50 actions in the first periods of the National Drug Strategy. 25 have been delivered, 20 have been delayed. What about the other 5, Minister? Again, you might give us a note in relation to that. And the figures you gave in relation to the amount of deaths, we're talking in terms of 2017 figures in relation to that. Again, one of the issues that come across many of the drug task force, the amount of suicides, drug-related and so on, and the difficulty in getting that evidence in relation to that. And is there any possibility of looking at something in relation to that? And again, I suppose the importance of the holistic approach to the drug crisis and the active engagement of all parties. And I think that's the key, Minister, in relation to that. So we need more people around the drug task force area. And I suppose lastly, in relation to those frontline services, again, it hasn't been mentioned this morning, but people are on the same income that they were 10 years ago. And then again, they're Section 39 workers in relation to that. And again, Minister, they need a voice in relation to that. They're losing key personnel to the private sector in relation to that. And again, that's something that needs to be addressed. So I suppose what I'm asking, Minister, is that, what we need is a champion for change. And you need to be that champion. You need to be that voice around the cabinet table. But clearly, as the view is out there that we're losing the challenge that's facing many communities, and many communities are, we're looking back at what happened in the 80s and late 80s and 90s in relation to Dublin, and the fear in many communities, not just in Dublin, is that we're going to face another epidemic from crack cocaine that we faced from the heroin epidemic. So we have I suppose there's a pathway forward, Minister, but we need changes, and we need to involve not only task forces but the community in relation to those changes that need to happen. Thank you. Minister, do you want to respond to any of those points that I've made?
Yeah, look, the NOC, look, we've created working groups to drive the implementation of priorities. And I think that these groups will strengthen the interagency partnership, and they're independent. We selected 6 independent chairs, and effectively, they're there to ensure accountability on all the stakeholders, including the department. And I think they'll bring impartiality, they'll bring insight and experience in addressing the challenges that we all face. Regarding your Section 39 workers, I'm going to bring in my colleagues on that because it's a detail that I wouldn't be as familiar with. Regarding the notes of the debt 2017, I'm going to ask my colleague as well to address that. And also, you talked about the 5 outstanding issues regarding the 50 areas of the National Drug Strategy. I'm going to bring in my colleague as well to address that. I don't know, is there anything else?
No, that's fine, and you can give a note on some of those issues that are outstanding.
And I got to bring Jim Walsh in on Sláinte here as well, because they'd have more of a knowledge of that finer detail.
Okay, I'll let my colleagues then in after that then. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just briefly, one of the things we want to do is to better align community-based drug and alcohol services with a broader approach of community services as set out in Sláinte Care. So the new community health networks are a building block of that, and that's why we want to see that new funding very much integrated into existing provision and building on existing community-based provision, because that is the model that Sláinte Care has set out, and the resource allocation model is also part of that. So we're really driving and promoting the Sláinte Care agenda in the new 2 million community enhancement fund. Eamon's going to talk about the drug-related debts now.
Sure, thank you. So I'm glad you highlighted the issue of the drug-related deaths, and the figures, most recent figures we have are from 2017. The reason for that is that identifying drug-related deaths is a process which requires staff going in, looking at coronial records and discussing things with the coroner. So these are very sensitive records, and with the issues we've had with COVID, people haven't been able to access those records. But we will hope to have the most a joint figure of 2018 and 2019 reported this year. But I would like to bring you back to where you mentioned about the suicides, and that's a really important area. And the increase in suicidal behaviour amongst people who use drugs is recognised in the Irish suicide prevention strategy, Connecting for Life, and we sit on that, and we're engaged with that. One issue which we would hope will improve matters in this regard is the establishment of the dual diagnosis clinical programme in mental health. It's recognised that the overlap between substance misuse issues and mental health issues may be a factor in relation to suicidal behaviour, and the establishment of that clinical programme, which is just about to sign off on its model of care and implement in 2 areas in 2022, with further areas after that, will be a real benefit for the service user, and particularly those people who are experiencing mental health problems associated with their substance use.
Is there, in relation to the task forces, the different departments, have you a view in relation to that? Do you think it'd be a good idea? On mute, Minister.
The National Oversight Committee, I would think, will deal with that. But again, we need much more collaboration. I think a lot has been done in the last few years, but it's an aspect of to deal with these very, very difficult issues. We need cross-government, cross-community collaboration at all times.
Yeah, Minister, it's touch and go with some strategy agencies attending drug task forces right across the country. Some areas have a good attendance, others don't. So again, it's something that needs to be addressed. And okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, and you've raised this before, and in fairness to you, look, if an agency or if somebody is on a task force or part of National Oversight Committee, the least you'd expect that they would show up to represent, but also hear the views of the communities and represent their various agencies or departments. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
I'm going to bring in Nessa Horrigan now.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be very brief. I just have a quick question, but before I go into my question, I just I'm glad to hear contributions such as Deputy Crow's contribution around the Citizens' Assembly. I think if there's one thing that we've gotten from this session is that there's a really broad spectrum of opinions around what we should be doing on the drugs issue, and it's still a fraught and debatable area, and I think that Citizens' Assembly can't come soon enough, because it allows us to take some of the heat maybe out of the discussion and look at the evidence. So I'm glad to hear on this committee that there's support for that. It's probably one of the perils of a live session, but just to go back to the North Inner City Task Force, who it seems somebody is watching from the session, they informed me that they met with the department on the 13th and that they were told by the HSE that there is no allocation in its budget, in its operational budget for 2022. Would the Minister like to respond to that?
I don't have that detail, but I'll ask my officials.
So I think they met with the HSE. I'm not sure the exact date, but I understand.
It's the 13th.
Yeah, so funding is available for the provision of services within the 2.2 million. That pot of money is still there. They have to agree an SLA with the HSE, and I would encourage them to engage with the HSE on that, and we would be supportive of that. But it needs to be.
But right now, they've been told that there's no allocation for their group. Sorry, Mr. Watchett, you can see from a local representative's point of view, it does look like the department is running down the clock on this. This has been going on since, I think, the 6th of July, and they are now not in receipts of funds, and they do. In any community engagement, there's always work to be done on governance. There's always a way to make things better and to ensure that there is good governance there. But I have yet to see any proof that there isn't good governance in this particular group. Nobody has put that in black and white in front of me. There is an implication here, since seems to be they've been told that there's no allocation of funding, that that there's a strangulation of this organisation, and 2022, we're in it now. It marches onwards. The people of the North East Inner City desperately need those services.
Deputy, I can assure you there is funding available there to the company. It needs to be then discussed and agreed an SLA as to what that funding can be used for. But I assure you the funding is available, but it needs to be discussed as to what will be used for. And that's a process.
And could you shed any light to me then as to, okay, that's not the, yeah, okay, thank you.
So I'll follow up, Deputy, with a note on that for you from the HSE, just to be clear on that, because clearly you're not getting the full story.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Bernard Dorkin.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that there's a point that we need to emphasise in this debate, and the last speaker referred to the broad spectrum of opinion that's emerging. That's quite true. But what I find difficult to understand is why, for instance, we read about in the reports from Tallaght and so on and so forth about young mothers being forced into prostitution to pay for drugs. That's babies' drugs, whether it be crack cocaine or whether it be a beginner drug like cannabis is immaterial. The fact of the matter is the people who gain most out of all this are the drug barons. And the late Tony Gregory, with whom I served in this house for many years, he targeted, much at his own risk, the drug barons right throughout his constituency and outside it. And I believe he was right. I believe that you have to target the supply and do it in a very, very forceful way. And I compliment the Gardaí for their successes over recent times in that particular area. But if the drug barons continue the way they are, the modus operandi is quite simple. They feed the habit. They create the habit. They start off with young children, teenagers and young children in primary school level. And they start off by creating the habit amongst them with what are known as passable drugs or less harmful drugs. All drugs are harmful. And the more addicted the unfortunate child becomes, the more harmful they become. But the people who have most to gain out of all this are, again, the drug barons. And the drug barons don't make poor people rich. They simply make them poorer. And I think we've got to recognise that.
Okay.
And I think that the persecution and prosecution of the drug barons, the suppliers, must continue in a meaningful way. And any suggestion to scale that down or to reduce that activity in that area would be absolutely fatal when it comes to dealing with drug addiction. So I think the Gardaí incidentally do treat initial cases with a fair amount of consideration, and they don't want to prosecute and create a criminal record where it would be for first-time offenders and so on. But we need to be careful not to create a situation in the future whereby it becomes acceptable, and particularly as well with recreational drugs. Like, you know, how are we expected to face people when they say to us, "Well, okay, you
questions?
We have a problem.
Fairness, will you please?
How do we deal with it? Do we cut off the supply? I think if we don't cut off or limit the supply severely, we're going to make the situation worse."
If I might come in there, I think there's a lot of things happening here, and I think the revision of the adult caution scheme has led to a significant reduction in the number of prosecutions for just simple possession. But also, we are, as a government, committed to tackling serious and organised crime and in all its form. And you can see from Commissioner that they want to dismantle the operations of criminal organisations. And you know, I want to commend the Gardaí and indeed Customs for, I suppose, disrupting the activities of these criminal groups, and they're implementing strong measures to disrupt and dismantle all these organised crime networks, and I think that's very welcome.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Thomas Gould.
Thanks, Chair. I just have a few questions, but I'll be as quick as I can. First of all, the Minister and the officials have referenced the Tallaght Drug and Alcohol Task Force report, which is an excellent report. But just a couple of points they made was the urgent need to address the impact of crack cocaine on individuals, families and communities. Now, what this report said is that even before COVID-19, there was a chronic underfunding. Now, they've looked for €1 million. Is the Minister and the Department going to provide that €1 million? That's the first question. Second question in relation to the Dublin inner city. I believe the Department have acted in contravention of the Task Force handbook in the appointment of the new chair. The actions that have been taken by the officials since then have been truly shocking. And just listening to Jim Walsh there and replying to Deputy Horrigan, it still doesn't answer the question. Is there funding there for North Inner City to keep doing the work they're doing? Because like other TDs, I see no evidence in relation to issues about governance. And if there are issues, I think this has to be an open and transparent conversation. So I have serious issues about what's happening in the North Inner City. Just then, Minister, in relation to Keltoy, will you give a commitment now that will be reopened, because that has been closed during the COVID-19 pandemic? I believe it has had serious implications. So I'm looking for that commitment off you now. And also in relation to the 50 actions in relation to the drug strategy from 2017 to 2020. There's 5 that seem to be missing. And one of those, I believe, was an action directly involving women who were pregnant and about services and support for them. So maybe the Minister can give me a response to that. on those questions, Sharon. If I have more time, I hope to come back in and then ask the Minister and the officials to keep their responses brief, because I have loads of questions that we need answers to.
Thank you. Well, first of all, regarding the funding, and you've raised Tallaght again, the 200 and 240,000 has been given to the CHO in that area. They can go down.
Sorry, Chair.
I haven't finished.
In the report, they asked for $1 million.
Yeah,
that's what they asked for. It's a yes or a no question.
Let the Minister
there's 240,000 that have gone to that area, but also we have allocated 850,000 over 3 years. I'd be looking maybe that you'd have 4 different groups, maybe 5, but that would tell me that you'll have over 250,000 or 220,000 a year for 3 years. But I think that our officials can sit down with the HSE as well and address the TAL issue. It's part of the report. We're looking for $1 million, but I think we've allocated a sizable amount of money for emerging trends, but also to deal with cocaine and crack cocaine.
The answer to that is no. So just in relation to the North Inner City.
Well, the answer to that, Deputy, is that we've come a long way towards $1 million. And
Minister, there's an epidemic of crack cocaine use at the moment. An epidemic that the officials, I have the report here. You have the same report.
And we have got 850,000 per year.
We're talking about, like, we've never restored funding to task forces. 10 years ago, task forces were getting more funding. You're the minister now. And just to let you know how far I feel you are behind and the department, in my budget submission that I put in as far as Sinn Féin's budget, I look for an additional 45 million to go into drug and recovery services. Now, what you announced in your budget was 6 million, 1.8 of that for homeless, which shouldn't have been included in the budget in your drugs budget submission. So what I'm saying is you're offering 4 million. We are looking for 45 million. And that won't even solve the problems. That's just a start that what needs to be done. In relation to Tallaght and North Inner City, could I get answers on those, please?
Yeah, look, as I said, we can go back and forward regarding funding, and we will work with you regarding funding. Regarding Tallaght, look, we all know it provided very, very valuable facility, but unfortunately, it was used as an isolation facility for the marginalised and vulnerable during COVID-19. It's still in significant demand for isolation, and it'll be maintained as a COVID isolation facility for the coming winter period. And hopefully this has been reviewed on an ongoing basis. But to get more information, maybe I might talk to Eamon Keenan. Do you have anything else to add to that, Eamon?
No, I suppose it is still being used as an isolation facility for marginalised and vulnerable people. But the HSE does remain committed to enhancing the residential addiction services, and that includes the reopening of Tallaght once it's no longer required as part of the COVID-19 response. But I would point out that the counselling staff from Tallaght are continuing to provide aftercare support to individuals via the HSE Stanhope Street service. So as much as possible, continuing to provide that counselling support.
And if I can bring in Jim on the North Inner City and maybe the 5 outstanding issues that was mentioned.
Yes, the missing 5 actions. So what's happened there is we didn't have enough information to make a definitive judgment as to the progress going on there. You did mention Action 20, which is about expanding addiction services for pregnant and postnatal women. And under that, there are, I think, 7 plus sub-actions. I know there has been progress on some of them. I mean, the most obvious one is the drug and alcohol liaison midwives. We have now provided funding for a drug and alcohol liaison midwife across the whole country, across all the hospital groups, and that was been a significant achievement. But there are other aspects of that we don't have enough information on, and we are working to make sure we get additional information on those actions. So I'll give you back a separate note on those, Deputy, because you've identified that gap, which is very fair to address.
Sorry, Jim. Like this program was from 2017 to 2020. We're now at the start of 2022, and pregnant women who are some of the most vulnerable people in the throes of addiction, and we've got nothing. It's shocking, Minister. And Minister, I think you need to step in here now. These are people that need support. This is unbelievable. Out of 50 actions, it's not even included in the response, and there's 4 others. So I don't think it's not good enough. I think something needs to be done, and I look forward to it. I suppose I'm also looking to find out in relation to the north of the city then also.
Well, Deputy Gould, I will call down in the coming weeks once this COVID has receded.
Chair, just a final point to note that since COVID-19 came in, we've lost 100 residential beds, and there are 500 people now on the waiting list for those beds. So, Minister, that needs to be actioned. I know there's other deputies and senators want to come in, and I won't take up their time, but like, addiction services and recovery services have been one of the worst affected because of the COVID-19 crisis, and I think the onus is on us now, and the Minister and the Department, to act urgently.
Thank you. That's a very pertinent point, Deputy Gould. And maybe I just want to ask Dr. Keenan, maybe you might be able to address that.
Yeah, I suppose, like all services across the HSE, the COVID-19 pandemic has been extremely challenging to manage. We were very grateful to be identified as an essential service early on, and that it did allow us to target those people who were on waiting lists for opiate substitution treatment and engage those people in treatment, and we have been very successful in that regard. I take your point in relation to the residential services, which have had to scale back because of public health requirements, and also let's not miss the point that staff are also have been affected by the COVID pandemic, and whether that's being sometimes moved to deliver frontline services or sometimes having to isolate themselves. It's been a very challenging time.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Rowanna's next.
Thanks,
go
thanks,
ahead.
Chair. I won't be too long. It's kind of, and Minister, maybe it's obviously up to yourself, but maybe Jim is better off answering it. It's kind of a continuation from his conversation with Nessa, so it kind of just adds on from there. I'm just wondering about, and maybe there's nothing in it, but when you have emphasised a couple of times that you have said that there's funding there for the company, and it's just an odd phrase to use because usually would say the funding is there for the task force, and I'm wondering, is there a reason that you've used the word company a few times? Like, has there been a separation in terms of how you're engaging with the North Inner City, in terms of, are you saying company because you're engaging in an administrative kind of way rather than with the North Inner City Task Force as a structure with its members and its chair? So I'm just wondering what the differentiation is there, and if there is one, maybe I'm just picking it up wrong.
No, it's simply the SLA, that's the funding arrangement within the HSE, is with the limited company.
Yeah.
That's the mechanism. So that's the relationship. So if funding is distributed through the SLA, it doesn't go to the task force, it goes to the limited company. So yeah, it's an administrative term, Senator. I'm using it in.
I just wanted to figure that out. Obviously, being a chair of a task force, I'd be obviously familiar as well with the SLA process, and I sat in those meetings obviously quite recently in terms of the canal. So I'm wondering, is there an issue with the current SLA as it is being presented? Like, is there changes in this SLA in comparison to the SLAs that they used to sign? Because they'd usually be quite predictable. So I'm wondering, what is the delay in the company signing the SLA? Is there a requirement or some sort of stipulation in this SLA that differs to the past that is holding up the kind of normal process that would usually take place with an SLA? So I'm just wondering, in terms of the appointment of the chair and the structures, is there something new in this SLA that kind of is holding anything up? No. Okay, great.
No, I mean, the funding has to be for certain activities. It's up now to the company to set out, these are our activities. We're very conscious there's 2 staff there, and we want to protect those staff. But we need to know, okay, you get the money, what are you going to do with the money? That's a very simple thing to do. And like any other SLA, what are you going to deliver? And the HSE have asked the company, please engage with us. We have some money available. What are you going to do with the money?
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, going to move on to Roisin's next.
Thanks, Sean. Look, just picking up on a number of points that were made over the last couple of hours, I think it's true to say that there is a sense among a lot of people working at community level that there's a kind of anti-community attitude on the part of your department, Minister, and currently, but you know, that has been kind of developing over recent years. You talked about a time frame. This was a 2017 strategy. Some of us have been involved for much longer than that, and it goes back to 1996 when the task forces were first set up. And the key difference that was evident at that stage was that this was about listening to the experts on drug misuse, and the experts, the people who are living with it on a day-to-day basis, and who know the contributory factors to people getting involved in the whole area of serious drug misuse and the blight that that is on their lives and on their families and on their communities. And it certainly was the case that task forces and community reps were much more centrally involved. I had the honour of chairing some of the oversight meetings in 2011, 2012. And I know from first-hand experience, the people who were dynamic at those meetings, the people who are bringing the real up-to-date live information on the drug scene and who are talking about those contributory factors, the whole of government stuff, kind of elements of serious disadvantage that were contributing to drug use. Those were the people who contributed most at those meetings. And we had different representatives from different departments who in the main weren't touched by the problem. And those community people were absolutely essential. And we also know, and I am a member of a drug task force, have been for a few decades, and also I was a member of a second one for a certain period. And I know that drugs task forces were highlighting the cocaine and the epidemic for many, many years, long before there was any recognition of that at official level in your department or indeed in any other department. And these were the people who were campaigning, saying that we need to respond. This issue is going to get out of control. It's destroying people's lives and communities. And that wasn't listened to. And now here you are in 2022 saying, I'm allocating 850,000 a year. And we know one single task force is making a demand of €1 million. That's what they need to respond to this issue. So it's not a substantial allocation, Minister. And please don't fool yourself that that's substantial. I also read the press statement that went out with that announcement. And like that talked about that 850,000 going to the HSE and CHOs deciding on how that's going to be spent. CHOs, I mean, they're grand in a whole lot of specialist areas in relation to health. In the main, they don't have expertise. HSE officials don't have great expertise at local level on the nature of the drug problem. So, like, you're not even getting close to responding on the level that is required in terms of responding to the epidemic of cocaine. So, like, I also would say to you, I noticed that the Taoiseach said in a debate in the Dáil in November last, just a couple of months ago, that he wanted to see an expansion of supports for task forces. So where is that expansion of supports for task forces? I mean, they've been left on very minimalist budgets, and even the additional 850,000, that's not going directly to task forces. So, like, it's not on a scale that's required. So we need to get real about the nature of the cocaine problem. The other thing, Minister, and you've used this term, whole of government response. Like, we're not getting a whole of government response. In the early days, the drug strategy was located within the Taoiseach's department, and the Taoiseach insisted on the relevant government departments responding at a senior level and in a meaningful way. That's stopped now. The response is not a meaningful response. And I would particularly highlight education. I mean, it's neither meaningful at the national level in terms of the oversight committee, and it's certainly not meaningful at local level, where many of the representatives of those government departments don't even bother attending anymore. And education, it has to be said, is by far the weakest link in all of this. So can you give us any kind of sense that you are going to fight the case for additional substantial funding at local community level for task forces, where the people who know this problem best and who know the many, many aspects that feed into it and who have proposals for addressing them? So can you give us any kind of encouragement that you are taking this seriously, that you recognise the particular strengths that the task force bring, that you will do what the Taoiseach said about providing additional supports, and that you will insist that other government departments play a meaningful role, particularly at local level, and also in relation to education, as I say, at local level, where that is a key factor in one of the many aspects of this issue, the contributory factors, educational disadvantage, early school leaving, which is a key factor in relation to those who go on to engage in drug use. So give us some grounds for hope on that, Minister. And are you going to fight the fight for those communities that are most blighted by drug use?
Well, thanks very much, Deputy. I just want to say I am committed, and you've raised some interesting points, but I am committed, and we've already increased the budget in my last two budget terms as Minister. Department does fund 280 community drug projects around the country, and we have to tackle the social determinants of drug use. Regarding various departments not attending various committees, that's unfortunate and it's wrong. As again I said to Deputy Crowe that or the chairperson that if somebody from a department or somebody from an agency, some from a grouping is on these groups, that the least should do is attend and show an interest and bring back the concerns of the communities to the various educations. I think you said that education is the weakest link, and I think we need more education. We need to work closely with the Department of Education, maybe to try that bit harder.
But Minister, are you going to do anything about that? Is it just words here, or are you actually going to do anything? Have you recognised the fact that education is such a weak link? And tell us what you will do urgently to address this.
I think that the chair of the National Oversight Committees working together, with all the various stakeholders, and that's why we have the National Oversight Committee, and I will work with them. Of course, I will work with them. But effectively, we need to work together, and we need to tackle the determinants of disadvantage and the prevalence of, I suppose, drug use. Regarding the Taoiseach's department, I liaise closely with the department. There are some issues regarding funding that I might bring in my two officials regarding the funding.
I'm conscious that we're running out of time, and I've wanted Senator Hoey's trying to come in as well. So go ahead.
I just think it's important to note that our funding from the Department of Health goes to community drug projects. It doesn't go to task forces. It goes to community drug projects. And we fund 280 of those across the country. The funding that we're going to be allocating on the crack cocaine initiative, it will go to community projects to deliver the services. What we want is, though, a planned approach involving all the organisations, the HSE, the task forces, to identify what are the needs and how best can we respond. We need strategy and planning, as well as good delivery on the ground. And we will have that in the crack cocaine. We will be supporting services on the ground. I'll let Eamon elaborate more on that. But we need it on a basis that's evidence-informed and it's strategic, and we have clear outcomes. Because otherwise, we're just throwing money at a problem that will not deliver any results. So Just to emphasise that, is community response but in a planned way?
I'd just say it'd be great if you applied the same criteria to other government departments and state agencies so that they actually play a part and achieve results.
Roisin,
and that's not happening.
Okay.
Can I bring in Senator Anna Howie to last speaker? Last question here.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, Chair, for letting me in. I had to, I was listening as I was jogging back to Leinster House. I just want to, just from what I was hearing, there just seems to be a bit of a mishmash between some of the things that are being said and some of the actions that are being taken. So, you know, we talk about a health-led approach, but unfortunately criminalising would not be compatible with the health-led approach. And I think a lot of the international evidence would show that. So I just wanted to just put that up, and I know a number of other people, Senator Rowan and others, have talked about that. You've said, Minister, that there's no intention of either decriminalising or legalising, which are two very separate things, by the way. And I'm just wondering, is that, are you saying that because you don't want to preempt the work of the Promise Citizens Assembly on drugs, or is it because that is now the official government line for the period of this government, regardless of what happens, that there is going to be no engagement or discussion on decriminalising, which is really where the conversation's at? Legalising is a whole other situation. And I just wanted to then very quickly, you know, we talk about a health-led approach. I'm just wondering, have you had any engagement with the Minister for Housing in relation to, you know, housing first policy, ensuring that people with drug addiction who are currently you know, live, if you will, drug addicts have access to housing? I know there are a number of schemes that require people to, quote unquote, dry out before they're able to avail of them. But again, that isn't compatible with a health-led approach. So, you know, the likes of Finland who have a housing first policy. So I'm wondering if you had any engagement with the Minister for Housing on that, and how to progress that really, again, proven to be very effective housing first policy. And sorry, then the last point, I know we kind of briefly talked about medicinal cannabis. You know, we've had another high-level coverage today of a citizen being dragged to the courts. They're using cannabis medicinally because they have epilepsy, they haven't had seizures for a number of years. And I'm just wondering what engagement you've had, Minister, with advocates for medicinal cannabis, or what engagement you've had with officials in progressing that forward.
Thanks very much. First of all, I'm following National Drug Strategy, Reducing Harm, Supporting Recovery. There is discussions on Citizens Assembly on drugs, effectively. So at the moment, that's the booklet that we are following in the department until there's a change of direction. And I'm not sure will there be a change of direction, because I think legalising drugs would inevitably normalise drug use. That's just my opinion, but I'm just following the National Drug Strategy, and as it says, that's the roadmap that I am and we are using in the department. Regarding what was your other issue? I just wrote it down here. I just can't.
I was asking around the medicinal cannabis and also your engagement with the housing minister.
Oh, yeah. Well, the minute I was appointed, we ended up in the Customs House with Minister O'Brien and actually Minister Donnelly, and it was a very interesting collaboration. And I have visited the Housing First initiative in Waterford, and really, it's the way forward. And I think this department, certainly with the wraparound facilities on people who are homeless and who use drugs as well during the COVID-19 crisis, has been, I think, if you could call it a success, it's been a huge success, because we have saved hundreds of lives. And I want to thank all the stakeholders for the work they've done there. So there is collaboration. Finally, on the medicinal cannabis, I don't think it's in my brief, but I might ask Eamon Keenan to
the medicinal cannabis isn't within the brief of the HSE Addiction Services, and it's not within the National Drug Strategy. But can I just bring you back to the Housing First, in that there's 1.3 million has been made available to provide health supports for an additional 260 tenancies under Housing First for people who are long-term homeless. And then we're also enhancing the integrated care and case management service for 4,000 single homeless people who have complex needs. So the issue of addiction, homelessness and Housing First is very much at the fore. We're very much engaged with the Department of Housing in relation to that. Housing First is a really good initiative and it's one that we're supportive of.
May I just suggest, I just think, I won't ask any further questions. I think it's really important that you, Minister, the difference, and for your own brief to understand the difference between decriminalisation and legalisation and the impact that'll have on drug use and what we're saying and the perceived permission that we're giving, because they are two very different things. And I think conflating the two isn't very helpful in terms of for yourself and for ourselves going forward in this conversation.
I'm gonna move on. It's just two areas that we didn't address. One was, and it's the gaps in services. One is in relation to residential for residential treatment for females, and the other area is the childcare needs of those who are in residential care. You might send us a note in relation to that, Minister. I don't have time to bring in Thomas Gill. Don't have time to bring in. Apologies. So, Minister, you might come back with us a note in relation to those two issues. Again, thank you for you and your officials for coming in this morning. I think it was a really useful discussion. I have no power in relation to, as chair, of the input from members in relation to what they say or what the questions they ask. But I do think it reflects the challenges that are out there in relation to this issue, that people do have various views in relation to the way forward. But thank you, Minister, and your officials for coming in. I think it was useful. And I suppose anyone that's listening, that looking, that is in difficulty, that does need treatment, there is supports out there. So the committee will meet again in public session next Wednesday, 26th of January at 9:30 a.m. The meeting now stands adjourned. Thank you, Minister.
Bye, everybody.
And so there we go, guys. Give me 1 second. I'm going to flick on the camera and we'll have a quick discussion about that. Also, just to give you a heads up, in about 30 minutes or so, I'll be joined by Natalie O'Regan and we'll be having further discussions about this. I also just reached out to Casa. Casa, I don't know if you got your phone there, boy, but I just sent you a message. If you're free there for a bit, it'd be great to pop on there for a quick old discussion about everything that kind of went on there. But give me 1 second, I'll get my camera on and we will have a bit of a discussion there ourselves with everybody in the hot box. Sorry about that there, guys. I had to just run down and get my old cap. Boom, there we go. Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome along. And I should have actually scheduled this video. I found out about this there yesterday. Thanks to Natalie O'Regan, who shared that this discussion was going to be happening this morning. I wasn't able to get live for the earlier part of the discussion. But what we missed in the earlier part of the discussion would have been contributions there from Deputy Roisin Shorthall. There would have been Deputy Thomas Gould, Colin Burke, Gino Kenny. Who else did we miss? Who else was there this morning? Yeah, and also the opening speech there given by Frank Fian. That will be available over on oireachtas.ie. I think they should have this morning's discussion up online in the next couple of hours. I think it's normally by about 3 or 4 o'clock. I think you should be able to watch back what happened earlier on today. But again, you know, like what you're seeing there in what I showed, there's not much you've missed really. Like they're beating around the bush. Any half decent question that was put by them, they just beat around the bush. They never truly addressed the question that was being put to them. So it was very, very disappointing from the perspective of campaigners out there that it looks like we're, I was literally about to, nice, yes, nice. Just seen your reply there, Cass, a nice one, that's the job. But yeah, like it is definitely disheartening that whole discussion there, because the people with power are unwilling to engage and unwilling to acknowledge the fact that their policies are failing. Things are getting out of control under their watch, and they want to double down. They want to go harder on this. Anytime we have a discussion about drugs, they only ever really want to have a discussion about the harms of drugs, which is it's disingenuous. It's like having what's it like? I don't know. Can't really come up with a comparison there because it's just so absurd. I'm going to start this meeting there now. Oops, is that popping up behind me? I think it is. Oh, look, there it is. Hey. I'm just setting up a Zoom there because Casa is going to join us for a discussion, and also we'll be joined shortly there by Natalie O'Regan. So just flick on me other camera. Is that going to come on? Yes, there we go. Participants invite. Sorry now, guys, just getting an invite sent out there now, and have a bit of a healthy discussion. But what did you think, guys? Let me know in the hot box there, and we'll start reading your comments as well while we wait for the arrival of our special guests. So that link is in your inbox there, G, and just be prepared. I suppose I can blank out the Zoom in the background, but just be, yeah, you are live as soon as you join. I'll sort out this camera angle here now as well behind us. Just have to find the Zoom box. There we go. Unlock it. Move it there. Bring it forward. Lay it over me. That's the one. I'll make me smaller then. Look, see? I'm very accommodating. My guests are more important than the host. There we go. So Casa, join whenever you is ready, buddy. A quick swig. Oh, Casa the Struggles one must not shy away from the camera and show thy face. Definitely shouldn't be wearing a fucking balaclava and going out there trying to do stuff to battle the stigma by wearing a balaclava. Like, in fairness, like, it looks rather criminal when you're wearing a balaclava and you're handing out cash to the homeless. It's like, where does that cash come from? You engaged in criminal activity and giving the proceeds of your crime out? Sorry, I shouldn't be picking on that dude. Y'all know who I'm on about. Comments. Podge, what's happening? Podge is over there on Twitter, or Twitch, sorry, Twitch. Podge saying Gino was shot down straight away. And that Bernard donkey asshole needs to pull his head out of his arse, the pig. Definitely agree with you there, Podge. Bernard donkey is his head high, far up his own arse, I'd say. Because he's got some serious notions there. Like when he talks about drugs, he's talking as if he's like some 30 figure, like, you know, or you're an elected representative. But really, like, come on, so only speak about something which you've knowledge on. And acknowledge the bias that's, or like, the lack of other perspectives that are held within your opinion. Because when the likes of Bernard Durkin talks, he only talks about the harms. That's all he talks about. Like, he went as far as saying there within that discussion that cannabis odd makes you hallucinate and stuff like that. I'm surprised they didn't go as far as to say, like, oh yeah, cannabis is associated with murder. People who use cannabis are more likely to murder people. But yeah, no, some fucking absurd views out there. Make sure we don't have people in the waiting room. Nope, nobody does. Good. Green Bear says, good stuff, thanks Martin. Not a bother at all, GB. Again, as I say, apologies for not getting on earlier this morning and streaming the entirety of that. As I said, like, Gino Kenny brought up a very good question and made very good points as well around Germany, Malta and stuff like that. And Frank completely ignored those points and just went on to talk about his own. And you kind of heard it there, an answer he gave to another question there. We're following the national drug strategy and the health-led approach that's held within that. We're following the national drug strategy. That's all he kept going like back to. And Casa de Strugas pointed it out there as well, well observed, that Frank Fian was pretty much reading from a screen the entirety of the conversation. He wasn't at all like speaking from a place like from knowledge at all. It was just being read from a screen. There was probably somebody there on the other side, like fucking pre-writing that stuff, listening to the questions coming in and be blasting away on the keyboard. And it's like, Frank, look at your screen there. Look, your response to that is there. Frank is useless. I'm going to try to get in touch with other politicians out there and see if we can get a fucking motion of no confidence put in against this guy after this morning's atrocious committee hearing on that, because it's clear for all to see that Frank has no business holding the role of Minister for the National Drug Strategy. He has no business holding that at all. He was only appointed that because, one, he's in the party of the government, the people who are in the government, and two, he's put there because he's an ignoramus. He's more than happy to be sitting there, his hands folded, yeah, following the national drug strategy. It's a health-led approach. And he gets called out by fucking Senator Lynn Rowan on that bullshit, these bullshit comments about like, oh, it's great, we're moving away from this war on drugs, which is complete and utter lies. Complete and utter lies. We're not moving away from the war on drugs. Like, we had an opportunity to move away from it, but instead we almost doubled down on it. I done a discussion there on Judge, fucking what was his name? Ex-Judge Garth Sheehan's Minority Report. And again, Casa de Strugas was going to join us here shortly, was a part of the contributors to that committee at the time, who went in and argued, you know, representative of many students, and argued, I believe it was as part of Health Not Harm, but also I suppose you were wearing the SSDP t-shirt there that day as well, or top. But, you know, you went in there, made some great arguments, but still the work that was put in there, it was undermined by this prohibitionist. And then we see the likes of Frank Fian in there later on, just spouting that nonsense. Then again, shooting down arguments using this lad's Minority Report. Like, but in fairness, if you actually look at that report, they were in favour of a form of decriminalisation. They were in favour of moving away from the criminalising of drug users. That was explicitly stated in the Majority Report, that they do not agree with the criminalisation of drug users. They don't see it as an effective means of deterring drug use. But we don't hear that. Like, how much money was put into that committee? Hundreds of thousands, possibly millions. Crazy, like. And we just completely dismiss it because it wasn't in line with what the government wanted. Instead, we'll go, oh yeah, this judge there, like, he has a minority report. We'll fucking keep on hitting off that one there because it suits our agenda. It's just really enraging stuff. Sorry if maybe I was getting ranty about it. We'll hide the Zoom there until the guests arrive. Shall I pack up a vape? Feck it, why not? Oh, we must plug it in. Oh, I see Casa has arrived. We'll admit him and we'll get him in. One second there now, Casa. Boom, there we go. We have the video is up anyway, Casa. So when you your video appears, you will be live. I'm just going to hide myself. There we go, and we can start the second video. Boom. Gee, what's happening, my brother?
Hey, Martin. How are you, man?
I'm very good, man. It's good to see you. Right? It's been a while. Nice to see that the hair is growing out again. Living the islander lifestyle, yeah?
Well, you know, we're always from an island. It's just us islanders, you know, we get smaller and smaller, you know. It's easier to govern. The smaller the island, the more peace you have. And yeah, I was just tweeting that out as well. So just had a couple of minutes there to get myself together. Jesus, fair play to Lynn Ruan.
Man, she
what
was
a warrior.
Excellent. Like that would have been an absolute downer of a discussion if it wasn't for the contributions there of Lynn Ruan. Roisin Shortall gave good contributions as well, and Gino Kenny obviously was backing up his own cannabis side. But no, by far, I think the start of the show there today, if you call it that, was definitely Lynn Ruan. Like, like she just spoke with so much compassion. Like, you could really tell when she was speaking from the heart. She didn't have no screen in front of her reading comments or pre-written stuff. Man, she was speaking from where it matters, from the heart. Like, she was really representing our community, and honestly, Lynn brought me to tears, like, because I was just like, she's truly representing my feelings right now and speaking up for those who of us out there discriminated. So I don't know if others felt that way, but for me it was powerful.
Absolutely, Martin. Yeah, like, since Ming's departure from the Dáil, I think Lynn, and I know she's in the Senate, not the Dáil, but say the whole of Oireachtas and the houses of the Oireachtas, I think she's the only one who actually is a person who uses or has used drugs in the past, or has admits to that at least. I know we did hear from Martin Conway. He's always been very, very vocal as well as a senator. He's always been supportive. There was Annie Howie, you know, playing the Labour line of decriminalisation. Actually, I went to college with Annie Howie. I don't remember Annie Howie being at any single Students for Sensible Drug Policy meeting. I don't remember Annie Howie, who was part of the Labour Youth at the time. I don't remember Labour having any interest in drug education. I remember one particular time giving out information, just simple harm reduction information in the form of simple flyers, and being snubbed up by like one of the Labour youths who was also on the student committee, who was giving out condoms. And this was someone who was represented from the LGBTQI, like Annie Howie. And I made a comparison. I said, you know, if you're for this issue, you know, logically, you have to also support people who use drugs and their choice. And it was just, again, this is 2009, 2010, before Labour had their, you know, their golden boy, I suppose, Éon Riordan. You know, before that, they were really a dying party. They were peaking in 2009. They got thousands of people to go door to door for them or across the country, a lot of students, and they had a huge swell of movement there that looked like Labour were going to take, you know, some serious pressure in government, and then sure, they just folded. Like they went into a coalition and they folded. So I don't really have much time for that. The Greens now are that party. They're in that position today. It's good to see NASA. It's good to see a continuation of this like discussion about the Citizens' Assembly. I think that's the best thing that the Greens can accomplish in this government. It's not their policy of decriminalising. It's not their stance to legalise, which they've previously supported. It's literally just they're clinging on to this Citizens' Assembly, which it didn't seem so hopeful that it's going to happen from the words of Frank Fionn.
No, he was like, oh yeah, in the lifetime of this government, which we all know is up until 2025. So he's saying like, ah yeah, somewhere in that period. And then he went on to blame COVID. Oh, because of the restrictions, we can't have gatherings, but sure, Golfgate and all of those other debacles that they had there, no problems with gatherings there. But a citizens' assembly, no, that's not important. So he blamed COVID, and then he went on and blamed the Taoiseach's office as well. He's like, oh yeah, well, it's with the Taoiseach's office. We're after sending a number of messages their way or something along those lines, he was saying. But yeah, it's just this blame game. Blame COVID, blame the Taoiseach's department. It's not in my remit, you know, when it comes to medical cannabis then. What's your take on?
I mean, every day I think that this, you know, this delay of this procedure, whether it's the citizens' assembly, whether it's any form of discussion, whether it's a referendum, whether it's a vote, whether it's like a discussion in the Dáil, whether it's a bill or something to go forward that will actually make some progress, like every day that they can delay that is hundreds of thousands and millions of euro that is actually, you know, in whose interest is it to keep this status quo of keeping drugs illegal? Oh, we'll fund 850,000 that over 3-year period for these certain organizations to keep them quiet, basically is all I hear. Oh, so as to not have that conversation, we'll now allocate 850,000. It's not my money. You know, I don't think that Frank Fionn is paying, I don't think politicians pay fucking tax. Like, I know they don't in the European Parliament. I don't know what the situation in the Irish Parliament is. They get a very good pension at the end of it. He has no interest in making any affirmative change. He's literally there as a career politician with no experience in drugs, with no life experience like Liam Rowan. And that's why it takes like one person who actually has life experience. And it's like, it's so obvious who's the genuine person and who there is just the puppet. So I don't expect anything from Frank Fionn, and I really hope that the pressure will amount from the Greens and this citizens' assembly will be held. 99 random citizens from Ireland will be placed into a room to discuss this topic. Hopefully, some of us will also join there. I know that we've started already a process of getting a list together of experts from like around the world, like whether it be from the Global Commission on Drug Policy, you know, people like Helen Clark, maybe people from Australia and New Zealand who can talk about this, obviously Portugal and Malta as well. I think we have Natalie here, do we?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I just admitted her into the room there. Didn't want to interrupt you though. But Natalie, you're just joining us, and thanks very much for sacrificing part of your lunch break. I really appreciate it.
It's okay. I got my cup of tea and I got a fag, so I'm all right.
Excellent. I suppose you wouldn't have much of an appetite really after that discussion that we just witnessed there, would you? You'd be left feeling sick after it.
I am absolutely disgusted at some of the language and the conversations that was coming out of that room this morning. I mean, this is a committee that's supposed to be in charge of our national drugs policy, and they're sitting there talking about gateway drugs. They're talking about cannabis being used to give to kids, to open up a market. Like, they're not talking about people in the conversation. It's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, and all of the topics conversation there, it was always harm-based. They were always talking about the harms, but nobody was, well, at least none of the guys in power were talking about harm reduction. And how anything that they were doing was really harm reduction. They were talking about intervention, but again, how effective can that intervention be when the service, the people who were supposed to be the service users are not engaging with the service because of this barrier of stigma that currently lies there with, you know, you have to be clean before you can get access to some of these services, and keeping these kind of policies in place. It's counterproductive for what it is that they're saying that they're trying to set out to do, which is reduce harm, improve society and quality of life for people. They're achieving the complete opposite.
I think it was Roisin Shortall, I think, said it, like the rehab model that the government are promoting, it's over-medicalised, but it's ending up in like outcasting and like taking away the access to the services from a load of people who, as you said, who are not clean. Like that is not what addiction services should be. That's not what drug services should be. You know, everybody should be able to access them, and it shouldn't be over medicalized. It shouldn't be, the goal should not be to get somebody clean. I mean, there's people there, I think it was said at the meeting, that are 10 years on methadone. but it was said in such a derogatory way. I mean, those people that could be 10 years on methadone could be leading perfectly functioning lives.
Yep.
They could be in the
Yeah,
civil
like they
service.
could have a career, they could have a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's said in such a demoralizing way that, you know, that these people, even though they're 10 years on methadone, that they're worthless in society. I mean, it's disgusting the way that meeting went this morning and what was said at that meeting. It really and truly was.
Yeah, I was, and it was Deputy Roisin Shortall who'd asked actually Frank Feehan about the Citizens' Assembly, and he completely just beat around the bush and was like, oh yeah, well, it's not really my problem, and he did not commit to any date, which is very worrying. I don't know about you. Do you feel worried at all about that lack of committal there from Frank Feehan? Are you surprised?
I think judging by Frank Feehan's performance at that meeting, he doesn't understand the basics between decriminalisation and legalisation for a start. But I think judging by that performance, he is the king at avoiding answering questions. I don't think there was one question that he actually answered truthfully and straight. No. He beat around the bush. He just tried everything in his power except to answer the question that was asked.
Yeah, I would agree with you there on that. Eamon, his assistant, Jesus, fair play to Eamon, whoever, and Jim, Eamon and Jim, is like, I'll refer to Eamon there to that one. That was his thing of the day. It's like Joe Rogan and Jamie, it's like fucking Frank Feehan and Eamon.
I mean, like, there is a degree of, like, you know, decisions are being made by, you know, not just the front figure in politics. There is like a department and there are civil servants who've been working for 20 plus years who do make a lot of the shots. However, like, I think he's probably masterfully been put into a position where he can just verbatim just take everything that they're telling him behind. It looked like he was just reading from a teleprompter or like a laptop throughout the whole session. His eyes were down, going from left to right, left to right, left to right. At no point did he look directly at the camera and answer like a question genuinely. So, you know, it's like the saying, like, can you wake someone up who's pretending to be asleep? It feels like Frank Feehan doesn't want to be woken up to the facts and figures or the differences and nuances between decriminalization and legalization. It's him and only him who's making that mistake in terminology. There's no one else on the committee who's mixing up those terms. It's just Frank Feehan. It's like he's just masterfully placed there, you know, by whoever, to just keep on going. Every day that comes, it's hundreds and thousands and millions of euro that's in the black market. Should just keep delaying it further and further and further because it's benefiting someone. It's benefiting someone certainly more than us.
I mean, we're 2 years into this government now. He is 2 years in his position as the Minister for National Drug Strategy. He has had 2 years to learn. He's had 2 years to read all reports, see what went wrong, see what went right, if anything. And he's sitting there today at a meeting saying that decriminalisation will lead to de facto legalisation. I had to restrain myself from screaming at my computer screen this morning. Like, 2 years you're in your role and 2 years later you are still ignorant. It's not even uneducated anymore, it's ignorant, because he has chosen not to educate himself on this topic. And I know I'm using very strong words, but I'm really, really annoyed after today.
No, you've every entitlement to be right, because we've put in a lot of work and effort over the last number of years to try to help educate our policymakers, and what was just displayed there, or at least from the side that's in power, was a complete lack of education, a lack of understanding of the community that they're discriminating, which is a community of drug users, you know, all illicit drug users. They just straight up discriminate.
Yeah, they're people that they're discriminating against, regardless of any circumstances. These are people, they're humans. People are dying, people are hurting, and people are suffering because of this.
Yeah, and Frank talked about it earlier. I missed that part of the stream. I never got it live, but he talked about drug users having rights, but he completely is ignoring those rights of those individuals. He's not hearing those people. He's only going, and he talked about it. He said he's talked to the drug users, and then I talked to him at the rehab centres, and he's like, I asked them straight out, do you agree with legalisation or decriminalisation? And they all emphatically said no. Jesus, Frank, don't do it. Like a completely...
I call bullshit.
I call bullshit on it as well, but it's just like...
I call bullshit.
He's setting himself up for failure, though, because he's only taking in one person's perspective. It's a person, let's say, like, you know, if you talk to a person who's just suffered a horrific car crash, do you agree with bloody people driving cars? It's like, no, it should be all automated, it's much safer. You know, of course, you're going to get that kind of a perspective from somebody who's been harmed by something. They're going to be kind of very hesitant and reluctant to support it. And that's pretty much what he's trying
and
to
they
do.
become indoctrinated, Martin. Let's face it.
They've been indoctrinated.
To get through a process of becoming clean in a detox kind of center, like you have to admit to all these kind of conditions of your worthiness, like of how worthless you are as well, and your worthlessness rather. Sorry, thanks for my my slippage this morning. Literally, like just jumping on this call, but like. It's exactly that, Martin. You're asking, it's like someone coming out of prison or something, and it's like, oh, I want to give you rights as a prisoner, but immediately you won't have access to social welfare, you won't have access to voting, but do you agree that you were a criminal? And it's like, why are you putting that? Why would you even place someone in that kind of conversation? You want to talk to like people with evidence, like you want to talk to someone objectively. Like we don't go into a courthouse and just talk to victims. We talk to people objectively, and we get an answer, or we come to a conclusion. Oftentimes, people who go through recovery, can be put up as spokespeople for the prohibitionists, and I know because I've taken drugs before, so I know everybody should be criminalized. That's that. It's a conversation killer, an ender, and it doesn't end there. I'm sorry. But there's a lot of people who go through this kind of who are made into victims when they were never victims for the drugs. They were never victims from the drugs, but they're victims now because they've been caught, and they've been caught up into a system where they have to go to court and lie from the very beginning to the very end. And who's getting paid for that? It's lawyers are getting paid for that. Judges are getting paid for that. Prison wardens are getting paid for that. Obviously the politicians, in some way, they're going to keep getting voted in. He thinks he's going to keep getting voted in. I guess he's from the same constituency as Enda Kenny.
I think so.
Maybe his constituents are happy with this performance, but like the evidence that's out there in 2022 would be contrary to everything that he said today.
I mean, even if we look at this morning, the sound bite that was put out of the war on drugs as a failure. Frank Fionn is going to tell the committee. But yet again, he turns up at the committee and says the absolute opposite. What was the motivation behind that soundbite this morning? Why did he put that soundbite out?
Clicks.
And then just contradicts himself.
For me, I just think it's clickbait.
Some serious questions.
And you're right, the media play a huge role. You're right, Natalie, the media play a huge role in this as well. And, the media's role really in society is to be a filter between the policies and the communities and the peoples who vote those policies, and they can be informed at the next election as to who's actually done the things that they've set out to do. And I'm sorry, they're not scrutinizing enough. They're not going through what is actually intended by Frank's actions and not just Frank Fionn's words, because his words are exactly that. They're contradictory of what he's then sitting down at the committee and who he has to face up to. And at a single question, he's not able to answer that. He's stuttering. His eyes are moving down the table. He's not looking face to face. That is not a leader. That is not someone that we want in the Oireachtas, especially in the higher house of the Dáil. I mean, that's crazy.
You want to have a politician regardless of their role. I mean, they're there to speak for us. They're not there to read off of a pre-printed and pre-written sheet. You expect more from somebody who, especially when they're getting paid that much to be a politician and a TD.
Do you think there's a chance that there could be a motion of no confidence pushed on Frank Fionn after this morning's disturbing performance?
I'd love to see one, but I'd love to see somebody else in charge of be the Minister for Drug Policy, especially somebody who is actually educated and has passion for the area. I mean, thankfully this morning at that meeting, even every meeting I go to, there's more and more and more voices that would be on our side, that would speak from evidence, from passion, from being on the ground. You had Lynn Ruane, you had Gino Kenny, Roisin Shortall, Anne Hoey came in at the end, even she was talking sense. There is more and more people who are coming out against prohibition and can see the flaws in it, which is a good thing from our side. In regards to a motion of no confidence, I'd love to see someone else in the position, but I don't think there's enough government appetite or votes on either side for that actually to go through, I'm afraid.
No,
there's also the threat that it could go to somebody worse than Frank Fionn. He talks about national drugs. He at least he's hitting these buzzwords, and you'd wonder who else would actually replace that guy.
Bernard Durkin put in a good effort there this morning, didn't he?
That man needs to be far away from any conversation on drug use.
Yeah.
Absolute, gateway drug. People are giving cannabis to kids so they can create a market.
How can he say this
Oh
stuff?
yeah, like that
like,
makes sense.
people like he was talking about cannabis like that. People are willingly giving it to kids, poisoning
For
kids
free,
for free.
you know,
like,
because
it's like,
dealers
come
give away
on.
drugs for free, no problem.
Oh, I wish I looked younger.
Like, if I get Botox, do I qualify?
I know.
Like,
No, it's absolutely
like-
absurd. It's pure fear-mongering that went on there from Bernard's part. Anyway, I think his contribution was. I'm going to go back and I'm going to make some clips out of it. See if we can get some music artists to make some funny music songs there, because there was not a shred of truth to anything that man said at all. Talking about hallucinations from cannabis. In fairness, like, how many people out there really hallucinate from cannabis? It's few and far between. You really have to try to get there, to get to that hallucination, you know, and maybe eat a load of edibles, possibly, and couple that with some
And in
nice quiet
cases where
space.
there might be people who've had hallucinatory episodes, what other substances were involved in those cases? Like, you could pick out, cannabis was in a person's system when that hallucinatory event happened, and I was reading some awful headlines up in Northern Ireland recently and they're just mentioning cannabis in the headline, and you read it in the body of the contents, and it's like, this guy has obviously serious issues, and it's one out of millions, and it's a history of thousands of years, and clearly there's other drugs around today that weren't around in the past, like psychoactives, created because of prohibition, that are much more likely to have been the cause of the problem that was also found in the person's system. And we don't talk about those drugs. It's just cannabis. It's crazy.
Can I get your opinions on what went on with the inner city drug task force and the conversation that was trying to be had there? They did not want to entertain any questions that were coming at them about that, especially around funding, even to go to Frank's assistants, Eamon and Jim, or whatever his name was. They didn't want to answer it. They couldn't really answer it. They were like, oh yeah, well, they just have to ask for it. They have to tell us what they're doing with it. But is that really normal procedure for these guys? Normally you would think it's just the kind of, they have a relationship where one of these drug task force, it should be known well in advance. It's like, it's January and you're only going to talk about what you're doing now for the year ahead. Surely that should have been done in October, November, and all signed off for by December. Ready once you hit the floor January. We're fucking running, lads. No, we're not crawling around wondering what's going on. And it's kind of, what are you doing over there? Oh yeah, what does that say about the inner workings of the agencies that are running this stuff?
There is, without sounding like a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, there is something going on behind the scenes that we're not being told about all this. No. They have repeatedly refused to appoint Anna Quigley to the task force. They're having issues now with the Tallaght drug task force. They're removing addiction nurses from the oversight committee. I really truly feel that there's something in the background. There's something being planned in the background. There's something going on in the background that we're not being told of. For the last couple of months, these issues are going on, and they've been highlighted repeatedly across the media and across social medias with no straight response from the government. But yet again, we see in the last week, 2 weeks, because Frank Lean was, I truly believe, because he was coming up in front of the Health Committee today, that he almost tried to tidy up his mistakes. So he's been awarding funding, and he's, I'm liaising with the nurses, I'm awarding funding, etc., etc. Throwing money at it is, you can throw money at everything. It's not going to fix the issue here. You can give 20 million, you can give 40 million, you can give 100 million to this issue, and it's not going to fix the issues. You know, there's a lot more that needs to be done in relation to task forces, in relation to addressing issues that the task forces are trying to address in communities, than just throwing money at it. But I do truly believe that there is something that we are not being told. Why is who is making all the decisions here behind these task forces and behind the oversight committee? He didn't answer that today either. He was asked multiple times who is making these decisions, and he refused to answer. Yep.
No, there was a complete refusal there for him to engage in this, and as you say, it's going to take a lot more than money to solve the problems around drugs. It's a willingness to change. It's a willingness to open your mind and listen to the people who are using the drugs. That's what's, in my opinion, what's largely missing here from anything from the government side. It's an honest conversation with the people in the drug using community. Because we're being ignored. The only people they're willing to converse with are people who've been saved by the prohibition, and they're willing to talk and support prohibition. Otherwise, we bury everyone else. We'll ignore the success stories that are out there. People like, say, myself, I've gone on and I've used cannabis sale on a daily basis. I can still go and get my college degree, no problems there. But when it comes then to me actually trying to get a job, it's like, oh, well, you've got a criminal conviction. That's impacting on my thing. But my cannabis use never held me back in life. But we don't want to talk about this. We don't want to talk about this. We only want to talk about, the young fellow who got the cannabis edible and he had a psychotic break. And meanwhile, it wasn't probably even cannabis yet. It was probably one of these other synthetics that we know are so prevalent out there at the moment. Do it in the edibles. It's
like I'm
yeah,
looking
you're dead
here.
right, Martin. I mean,
Go on, work. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's neither sustainable to throw 850 million every couple of years at a problem. We hear of a lot of money lately being thrown at different things to solve different industries, but we know at a certain time that needs to be paid back, and you can't just replace like key community figures who are representative of these task forces and local task forces, drug task forces, etc., and expect money can replace that. Money comes and money goes, but like someone like Anna Quigley, I'm sorry, but I think her experience is worth its weight in gold. Yes. She's been doing this since like this. I don't want to misplace like the era now, but I'm talking like.
Although
80s.
I don't want to put
We're
8
going to
years
say
on her
starting
either.
with heroin.
Yeah.
No,
I think since the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like, people of her era, there's very few left. And to negate her level of expertise on any committee, like big or small, local or national, like that is just very questionable. It's very dubious. And like what's the person's intent there to silence perhaps the most experienced person like to lead this whole topic? And that's Anna Quigley. To me, that's Anna Quigley. So there is that fight there, but I don't know, is that going to be resolved or not? Like, I think, Anna at the same time is very professional, and she's very well capable of being able to, deal with these people, because obviously she comes from, a time when it was even more crazy than what we're talking of today in 2022. So like, I expect that, that will sort itself out, but we can't be guaranteed either. Like, we can't be guaranteed with Frank Fionn. So it's a number of things that kind of need to be done.
What I'm hearing there from Bodie, like even you straight up said it, Natalie, you believe that there's a conspiracy there. And Graham,
no, I said I didn't want to sound like I was saying there was a conspiracy.
Yeah, no, and you went on to say that there was probably a conspiracy there.
No, I said I think that there is something going on behind the scenes that we are not aware of.
Yeah. Well, I can remember
way too many YouTube documentaries, I think, at this stage.
In the meeting, though, there was a talk there. I think it was the HSE official representing Frank Fionn at the time. He was like, "Oh, the conversation. We've gotten to an impasse between them and again the company." He kept calling them a company, which was very interesting. Nessa Horrigan pointed that out at the end as well. But he was like, "There's an impasse." But I think you pointed out what the impasse was there, Graham, and I think it's the personality of that individual. You mentioned Anna Quigley. It's what she supports. It's what she calls for. Again, she's another passionate, well outspoken person like Senator Lunawan, who knows the communities most afflicted by this prohibition of drugs, and she really wants to represent them in an honest way that's going to really benefit those communities. And I think that is the impasse. I think they're like, oh, we can't have her there because she's not singing from our hymn sheet. We have a song that's finally written over here, and she's singing a different song to us, and we don't support that, despite the fact that her song is much more lovely and it's much more in tune with the community that it's representing too. And that's my opinion. I think that's the impasse.
I would agree with you, Martin. I think the likes of, we'd say, Lynn Ruan on the Tallaght task force, Anna Quigley not being appointed to the task force as well. I think there are two women that they know they won't be able to silence, and there are two women that they know that will speak their mind and that will stand for what is right, and that no matter what they do, they know that they won't be able to shut those two people up. And I think that could be behind it as well. It's the fact that, are we causing trouble for ourselves if we allow all of this to go ahead? It's I do think it's because
it's a new one for me. A new one for me that was mentioned today is the Planet Youth. program that was mentioned by Frank Fian. So again, this is probably, the department speaking really behind the scenes, but this planetyouth.org, it's an Icelandic youth drug prevention program. And, they're hailing their statistic that, Iceland has a very low drug prevalence amongst 15 and 16-year-old students. And then they're selling like a book or some sort of way to, and it says, 5 steps, gather data strategy, year 2, follow up on that data strategy, year 3, disseminate that data and strategy, year 4, follow up again on that data and strategy, and then year 5, disseminate a strategy action. For me, that already is the national drug strategy. Why are we looking at another country's prevention program? I've never, okay, maybe it's just me, maybe this is being hailed by other governments, but I've never heard of Planet Youth being mentioned. But I have heard by the Human Rights High Commissioner, decriminalization. I have heard that being put in there as the first. If you go on the United Nations High Commission on Human Rights, the first point that they mention on drugs is decriminalize drugs. That's the first thing. So decriminalizing young people should be up here. But no, on this Planet Youth, they're only talking about drug prevention and how possible it is. And it's not unrealistic. It is very realistic because, well, Iceland has had a fall. And I'm just looking at it here from 1998 to 2020 in drug trend. And also everybody should just follow this now. So we're going to hear more of this. I think it's going to be put up there as the ideal policy here is to follow Iceland and their drug prevention.
But if we look behind the Icelandic approach, you can see what's behind it. And when you look what's actually behind the whole Just Say No to Drugs in Iceland, you can see why it's successful. There's sports clubs, there's youth clubs, there's free public transport, there's free libraries, there's free events for children, for youths. They go with the leading evidence on brain chemistry of youths and how youths' brains respond to drugs. They go with they try and tackle the peer pressure of it all. There's a lot more behind Iceland's Just Say No to Drugs than Just Say No to Drugs and educating youths. They give youths stuff to do in their community. They have supports, they have services available for youths. It's non-judgmental, it's non-stigmatizing. And that is the key behind it all. It's not just their education programs in their schools or their kind of stance on it either. It's what goes on behind it. Same with Portugal. You can look at the success of Portugal. It's not just decriminalization, it's the wraparound social supports that are given with it. And it's behind the scenes that makes it successful.
Yeah, they put heavy investment in Portugal into the services. We hear that time and time again. But in Iceland, I think is a key thing there is they really focused in on the ethos of Gabor Mata's kind of conversation around what fuels drug use, what causes a person to use drugs in the first place and to fall prey to drug abuse and to the harms then of drug abuse. And it's this lack of connection. And what they done in Iceland, I thought was the most powerful thing, and it's probably I'm very biased as a parent, is they had conversations with parents as to how it is important to you as a parent to spend more time with your kids and not only have conversations about it, but they enabled it. They enabled it through shorter working weeks. They enabled it through giving parents money that could only be spent at leisure centres, at outdoor activities and stuff like that, where they can go and enjoy and spend the most meaningful time with your kids, not sat at home bloody looking at your devices, not going to the cinema or something, no, actual leisure, getting outdoors, getting involved in swimming and sports and stuff like that. That's what's drove that. It's not being don't do drugs. They didn't even have really any increase there in the conversations around the drugs that I can see in that part. It was all focused on the connection of the person and the community, whether it be family, friends, work, and all of that stuff. I think that was the key focus there. And we look at what we do here in Ireland, and it's just like your man Bernard Orkin. We need to be harder than the drug users. Even your man Carl Crow's kind of seemed to be a supporter recently of ending prohibition, was calling for more enforcement of the laws around this one particular drug addiction service centre. That's counterintuitive to the argument. We need to actually provide the drugs to the drug users, and we need to go back again to the core problem, the whole reason why people actually go to get use drugs. It's a lack of connection with community, with people around them. It's a big breakdown there in society, and a lot of it again comes down to the policies that are there. again, you've parents out there that are working bloody 40-hour weeks, and that's not even enough. They have to get a bloody second job because their kid is doing a bloody extracurricular activity after school, and it's breaking parents. They put up with these extortionate rents, ever increasing fuel prices, electricity prices. It's absolutely absurd what's going on out there, and we're going to see an increase in drug abuse and drug addiction and stuff like that, not because of an availability of drugs, but because of the disintegration that's going on there within the communities because of these scammy policies that are just making life ever more difficult for the most vulnerable within our communities, is the people, you know, working class or, again, on social welfare and stuff like that. It's sick.
Well, you said it, Martin, and the average wage in Iceland is much higher than Ireland, and the wages increase as does the cost, as with the cost of things. So these things are pegged together. So things all complain, oh, Iceland is very expensive, but the average wage is much higher there. The sense of community is much stronger. And yeah, to be honest, I've been to Iceland once, and my impression was, I went to a Sigur Rós gig, and my impression was, like, if you're a type of person that survived on literally an iceberg in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, like, you're already a very, like, you're very with it. And they're very intelligent. They're very, like, survival mode. They don't even, like, want to get in a position of, you know, getting out of control drunk, because, like, their home could be 20 miles down, like, an ice valley, and they need to, like, make it home. You know, like, survival is, like, it's a totally different game than, like, the leisures of Ireland. And but the poverty question is the biggest point that you mentioned there, Martin. I feel like it's almost like Iceland is doing the reverse of Portugal. They're putting in all these things now, whereas Portugal decriminalized first, and then that they would say that has enabled all these services, and these services wouldn't have been able to be made possible. I'm not talking about simple drug prevention and education. I'm talking about harm reduction services. I don't know, are there an equal amount of harm reduction services in Iceland than there are Portugal? I doubt it, because asking this question to service providers in Portugal, and Lisbon in particular, in that area, they would say that it's only made possible because of decriminalization. And there was a discussion on a bill put forward in Icelandic. Right, and there was, exactly, and there was I mean, it could be either, right? But at the same time, at some point, you're going to have to deal with this decriminalization. There was a bill put forward in Iceland last year, but unfortunately it failed. And I don't know what merit it failed on, but in January, I'm just reading there, it was submitted in January 2021 to Parliament, and it was rejected in July. Now, do they feel in Iceland that they have a good grasp on drugs and they don't need to, you know, increase drug checking? They don't need to increase injecting? I don't know what the society there is what their problems are. They might be different to Portugal, but at some point you're going to have to decriminalize. Like, that is just going to have to happen. And that's not just us saying it. That's the WHO, that's the United Nations High Commissioner on Human Rights. And these people, like, we complain about them, but, you know, they know something. And even if they're saying it, and they're the most conservative institutions in the world, because they have to deal with other policies such as Iran and China, and they're still recommending and standing up to much worse governments than Fine Gael. You know, I mean, yeah, the cat is out of the bag on that one, but that was just on the Icelandic model. But you're right there, Martin. Poverty plays the biggest role, and that needs to be, if that's not addressed, then yeah, decriminalization will do nothing, really. Yeah, that's true.
I think Lynn said it today at the meeting. She was like, you're making drugs illegal. Just make poverty illegal and it'll solve the whole issue. Like, trauma, poverty, like, there is so much more behind the drugs issue than the drugs themselves. And the sooner they wake up and they open their eyes to it, the better, because they're running blind now, and they're running ignorant, thinking that it's just drugs that's the problem and nothing else.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And I think you are right as well in saying that they are running blind now. The prohibitionists, you can hear it in them. They're shaking. They're going back. They're pulling all their old tricks out of the bag now. They're going back to their old arguments and stuff like that, because it's been put to them now, not just from the public, but from within the political arena now. It's a very much a hot topic up there. And you can see there, even at that discussion had a lot of steam left in it. They could have went on and continued that discussion there this morning for at least another 2.5 hours, because there was so much appetite there for that discussion to be taking place. And it was in the favour of Frank Fien that they had only a 2.5 hour bloody time limit on it, because they got out of there. But you hear it in them, like, the prohibitionists are saying it, there's a lot of public support there for legalisation, but the public need to remember cannabis is dangerous. It's just like a minority is telling the majority, yeah, well, we know what's good for you.
Yeah.
Stop calling for this to all of you out there, because it's bad for you. We know what's good for you.
Yeah, the people, democracy, what's that?
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. It's so backwards that this goes on within our own government, and these people can get voted bloody in time and time again. But sure, that's a discussion for another time. Well, hopefully there'll be an election soon before the the end of this government.
Like, Judge,
well, who would you vote for? Who would be the party that would lead on the drugs issue, in your opinion, today, if there was an election?
Lynn Ruane for Minister for Drug Strategy. I'm sorry, Lynn Ruane all the way. She needs to take.
That's
control.
not on the ballot paper. I can't just put Lynn Ruane.
Can I just cross it out and just write it? Like,
yeah.
Don't spoil your
a referendum on having Lynn Ruane replace Frank Fien.
Yeah. No, you're dead right.
That's all we need.
I hope that they're educated. Like, I hope that they're some bit aware of the actual reality that is drug policy and the effects that it has.
Yeah, no, I think Cassidy was making a good point there, in that, like, who can we really support on this issue? Because really, like, and I'm just thinking of the big parties, because I know within People Before Profit and within, I believe, Social Democrats are very progressive as well with their policies around drugs. But when we look at the big parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Greens, Labour and Sinn Féin, largely the kind of the big five, there's no one there that you could look at that you could really trust or say they have a progressive policy. Like, Labour, they only want to talk about, they've got, again, Éadán Ardán, who only wants to talk about decriminalisation. He doesn't even want to entertain any conversation about regulation of any particular drugs until he gets this decriminalisation, which is rather stubborn of him.
But even when asked on decriminalisation, he doesn't kind of discuss what kind of model he wants or what kind of services should be in there. Like, Éadán is a supporter of decriminalisation, and he was probably the last Minister for Drug Strategy that actually tried to do a good job at it.
Yeah.
So I'm not putting him down in any way, but I think at the same time he needs to go further than a red badge with decrim and lay out what Labour wants and what Labour's views are on decriminalisation and what kind of programme and what kind of model he wants.
Exactly. And for me, the fact that they haven't done that and that they're only going with their little decrim badge, it doesn't say to me that that party at all is anyway committed to it. They don't have any progressive policy, a well-written policy document, and they should. They're a party with a lot of resources there, so they should have a document out there if they are supporting this. Sinn Féin as well, Sinn Féin, as much as I would like to be supporting them, and I do believe in the next election they will get a lot of power, whether that be a majority of power or what, I'm not too sure, but I do believe they'll be probably a part of the next government. But I'm not seeing anything there from them either, a willingness to commit to this change that's needed. Thomas Gould done a good job there representing the community and asking some very good questions this morning. But the party he's representing, even at their more recent Ardèche there, they failed to support this call for a reform of these policies. And again, it's to be mentioned.
Well, at the recent Ardèche, they did say that they were going to review their stance on national drug policy in general. It was very vague, but like, I know Thomas Gould, he does do.
They said that in 2016.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a rehash of old ideas.
It was the same motion. It was the exact same.
Yeah.
I think the Sinn Féin party, the Greens and Labour, they need to sort out their own internal leadership problems before we can rely on them to make a good decision when in government. I do have the support of NASA, the Greens, and getting this Citizens Assembly. I think that is good, and we have to focus on something positive, but it's not what they went into government asking for. And with Labour, I think if Éadán became the leader, and I think in the Just Transition Greens, if they came up with some sort of leadership position there or break off as their own party, maybe I could lend support there. But as it currently stands, I think you're right. I think it's just the odd person in the party who's really passionate for it, but because they can't get buy-in by the entire party or the leadership, they're kind of just felt like they're saying the same thing without developing an actual policy, because the party keeps vetoing any attempt that's made, or goes back to an Ardèche every year to review. But I mean, that's been what, a 6-year review since 2016. You had enough time to kind of look at, I think that was maybe that was specific to medical cannabis now, or cannabis. It may not have been all drugs, so maybe that's like new to them. But still, there's still been no like actual like explicative policy made by Sinn Féin, and until that's made, I personally can't. And the same with the other parties. I don't think they could take my support. Maybe we just run as independents again, Martin.
That's where I think that the answer lies. Is a good mix of independents going in there alongside of Sinn Féin. I would reckon. I think of Sinn Féin and a good number of handfuls of independents that are from the community.
We need a Ming. Yeah,
we need Mings, we need
since
Lynn
Ming's
Rowan's.
departure again. Yeah, Lynn needs to be a TD. That's the first thing.
Definitely.
She needs to get promoted. Yeah, that would be great.
Come on out of the small room, Lynn. Come to the big room and let's get this shit sorted.
And I think that's where she's headed. Like, I don't think anyone has any doubt that is her aim. And she's an ambitious woman, and that's credit to her there.
And I am right in saying she is independent. She's not part of a party.
Yeah. No, she's independent. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I'm glad she was stepping in for Frances Black today, because I think she's the right woman for the job today. I think.
Oh, 100%.
And I think she showed her worth as well, which was fantastic.
Yeah, no, she showed up the people in power. Like, it really goes to show how far out of touch the people are in power with the communities, because you can see a stark difference there between the presentation given by Lynn Rowan and the presentation given by any of the opponents there to her, Frank Fian and company.
Yeah, like the only one.
And Lynn is strategic too, like when Lynn started her term, she was very much trying to work with the system. I recall a bill and collaborating with Eoin Reardon and going through the motions and focusing on spent convictions and doing the policy things that, to be realistic and pragmatic about it, but seeing no progress even in her term. You can see now she's developing much more like directness. The questioning today, I think the best questions that I've seen from Lynn, to be honest. And I've watched a lot of her presentations and I enjoy her every time. But yeah, I do see her developing into an independent TD that can really take this issue forward, and maybe even get a junior minister position out of it next time. That would be cool.
Yeah, well, she's
like
well
when you look
deserving
at
of it.
She's doing this since 2016, well, 2014, 2015, even with the work that was put in to get the 2016 bill. Well, all her life, but political wise, like 6 years she's fighting this. 6 years. And she agreed to put that on the side for the working group. And then the working group practically threw it in her face with their report. And she's still fighting.
But exactly, Natalie, 6 years. Like 6 years, and what have the other parties done in that time? They're still reviewing the review of the other review that they're still positioning. What does that make no sense to me at all?
I mean, the working group were presented with overwhelming evidence for decriminalisation, and purely because of an opinion, they recommended no. Not fact, an opinion.
That's all it was, an opinion, and it was a very discriminatory opinion as well. When you listen to why he has it, I think just Garrett McGovern, he believes that we're a different breed to the Portuguese. I believe that was his comments.
Sheehan, not McGovern.
Oh, sorry, Garrett Sheehan. Jeez, my apologies there, Garrett McGovern.
There were a number of people who've made that. There are a number of people who tried to do that, Martin. There was also a consultant in the CUH around the time, it might have been on the Party Pills documentary or one of them, and they came out and they said,
I think that's what exactly that's what I misquoted
them. The continental Europeans, they're different to us.
Yeah.
The other Europeans are different to the Irish. The Irish, we can't give them anything to enjoy because they're going to abuse it. And that is like, that's crazy. It's like, first of all, why did we join the European Union? If people are really so different to us and our values, then why would we have accepted a union like 50 years ago? So it's a bit late now, kind of raising that as being a reason not to do. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, human rights at the European Union are talking, but sure, we're not human here in Ireland. So why would we want human rights like the rest of Europe? Yeah. And we're different, and we can't be trusted. It's the nanny state again. Like, so I think it's probably coming from that. It was coming from the consultant.
They reiterated it today, like, oh, we can't bring in a fine for personal possession because the Portuguese are a civil law country and we're a common law country.
That's right.
Yes, we are two completely different legal systems, and it is difficult to find a go-between that will work in both jurisdictions. But we give out fines for speeding, we give out fines for dangerous driving, we give out fines for drunk and disorderly, which are all criminal offences, by the way.
Yep.
So I'm not sitting here and I'm not going to accept we can't do civil fines, we can't do administrative fines. We already do it in different aspects.
Well, I'd be happy with no fines, to be honest. I'd be happy not to fine a drug user.
I completely agree.
You know,
you said it well earlier.
But you're right, like
though.
other Commonwealth jurisdictions. Canada, no? Is it
Canada,
like South Africa,
Australia,
UK?
and the UK, New Zealand, Australia.
They all
Canada,
have forms of
the UK.
decriminalisation.
Yep.
They
But
all
it
have
won't work in
forms of
Ireland. We're a
decriminalisation
different
and
breed
more.
of people. Like,
Can't trust the Irish.
I forgot.
like the lies are falling, the bullshit is falling. Where like people are seeing through the bullshit that's being told.
Big time, yeah.
How, you know, I mean, you can't just say, oh, we have this report or oh, we have this evidence anymore because we have Google. Like, unfortunately, normal people have access to Google and we can find out stuff for ourselves. Like, they need to wake up and smell the roses or smell the sunflower flowers.
Definitely. Natalie, I know you're going to have to get back to work shortly. Can I just ask the contribution given by Gino Kenny? He asked, and he presented very well as well, you know, about the fact that Germany is going to be legalising cannabis. What was your make of the response given by, or the lack of response maybe, given by Frank Fionn to Gino Kenny and the idea of ending this prohibition of cannabis in Ireland?
It just goes to show that Frank Fionn is not even willing to read up about Germany or read up about Malta or Luxembourg or any other of the European countries that are moving forward on the cannabis issue. It's just a complete shutdown. No, it's not happening.
Yeah, he didn't even acknowledge that point made that Germany were legalising cannabis this year within the lifetime
I
of
think
the
it might
government.
actually be news to him because I don't think he'd probably keep up with the updates either, you know. So we probably broke Frank Fionn's heart by Gino telling him that Germany was legalising cannabis.
Not my precious prohibition. Did you catch that part of Gino's contribution, G?
It's in the ball's in Gino's court there on that one, because without a bill putting forward to Parliament, then I'm sorry, but no, Frank Fionn can't vote on anything and nobody can vote on anything. So we're still waiting over a year for Gino's bill. Yeah. And the last time we spoke to him, he was actually changing the issue from legalization to decriminalization of cannabis. So to bring up evidence that, oh, Malta and Germany are doing it, but then why would you not put forward a bill that allows the Dáil? All we need is to force a vote in the Dáil chambers that would put people on the record of either being supportive or not on any of those questions, legalization or decriminalization. So I would just hope that Gino just does that rather than complaining to Frank Fionn. It's not my job. It's not his job. Whose job is it then, Gino? Whose job is it?
Yeah.
You know, but like, to be fair, he is asking us and consulting. So I do believe it's going to happen. It's just in what form, I don't know.
Like, I do agree with Gino as well at the same time. If he throws anything on the floor just to get a vote, because I agree with you, Graham, we need a vote. We need to see where people stand so we actually have something concrete to get annoyed about, basically. If you throw something on the floor, just for getting a vote, you're not going to see anything cannabis related or anything drug policy related reform back on that floor for a number of years. It's 2016 since Lynn's bill came on the floor, 2022, and we still have not had another bill in front of the floor since. You know, so if you throw something half-arsed on the floor just for a vote, you're kind of blocking the way for a few years. If you're going to do it, get it right. And I just hope I hope he does get it right.
I would say, Natalie, the fear is that you stigmatize further the non-cannabis users by only saying, out of all this discussion and all this progress since 2016, a bill that only decriminalizes cannabis.
Yeah.
That for me would be a step backwards, because we've been 6 years talking about every drug, and like also next year there's going to be a bill on psychedelics, and next year there's going to be a bill on heroin, and next year there's going to be a bill on crack cocaine. And so that no one should be a criminal for any of this. So it's either a decriminalized all drugs bill or it's a legalize and regulate cannabis bill. It's not a half-arsed decriminalize cannabis, because that seems to be the one that have the most support. I would say that decriminalizing all drugs will have more support than just decriminalizing cannabis, because people like Lynn Rowan, they're not on the cannabis issue. They're not on the cannabis bill. There is no collaboration between the two of them as far as I see. So it has to be a full decriminalize all drugs or regulate, tax and control cannabis like they're doing in Malta. I hope it's that, because that would be very good. But I think realistically, the one that is going to win on the floor in the Dáil chamber is the decriminalization of drugs. That's just the one that we've been talking about for so long.
But even with like Aidan O'Riordan and his decriminalisation campaign, back it up with a bill. back it up with the bill
Yeah,
and
yeah,
bring it to the
definitely.
floor.
Yeah.
Like, yes, Gino has his
Yeah.
talking points
Yeah.
on cannabis, and Gino is a fantastic supporter of cannabis. But you also have
He is,
other politicians who are in support of decriminalisation in general for all drugs. Back it up. Don't sit there and give me sound bites. Back it up with something.
Yeah, it would be great to see a
you'd
bill.
wonder, and since Aon, because Aon did that in the Senate with Lynn, and it got to some degree, and then it got talked about, and then got voted, and then it failed. But now that Aon is back in the Dáil as a TD, you're right. I'm surprised actually that hasn't happened yet. And there's no hint that will happen either. It's
Dawn,
just
if
to
you're
sign up and get
listening,
a
give me
red
buzz,
badge.
I'll give you a hand.
Yeah, exactly. Like the community will help. Like everybody's willing, and we see like with Lynn and like Gino. Like I mean, they're not on their own. There is a community behind them. There's a lot of people there helping for free voluntarily.
There's a lot of
and it doesn't cost
educated people in
anything.
the
You're right to
community
pick up
as
the
well,
phone.
like.
Yeah, a hell of a lot more educated. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I'd like to see: a bill on decriminalisation of all drugs from Aon, and a bill to regulate and control cannabis from Gino. I think that would be interesting. If we had those almost back-to-back debates, like year one debate, the first one decrim, and year two debate. If we got that before the end of this term and the Citizens' Assembly, that could be a very, very
So is that your three
interesting
things
time
you want
ahead.
to
So
see
we
in
can strategize.
2021?
2022.
2021 is gone. It's 2022 today.
I'm still in 2020, lads. So your top three things: decriminalisation, cannabis, and Citizens' Assembly.
At least you're not back in bloody the early 1900s like the prohibitionists.
I feel like I am.
Yeah.
Judging by today, I think we all are.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't be alone there in that one, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great desire
mental,
to
isn't
have
it?
there. Though. But I think a bill from it on right on at the decriminalisation of all drugs, and Gino Kenny's bill then looking at the decriminalisation and hopefully a legalisation or regulation of a market there. But going back to Gino's thing though, I think there's an opportunity. I was kind of against the idea of following a Malta type of thing where we just decriminalise and allow for setting up of these limited social clubs, but now I'm a bit more sold with if we can get much more allowances there for the social clubs and stuff like that, because it gives an opportunity for the local
2,000 plants. 2,000
plants, yeah, but I suppose at the person's home they can only have up to 50 grams of cannabis apparently, and they can only have they're allowed to have 4 plants and 50 grams. It's
4 plants.
Yeah,
But that's what I'm trying to find out for the last few days, because I was looking into Malta.
Yeah.
So you're allowed 4 plants and you're allowed 50 grams of dried cannabis.
Yeah.
So does that mean you can have 4 full flowering plants plus 50 grams prepped? In a way?
Yeah.
I have no
that
green
would be.
fingers. I have no idea how any of this growing and flowering works at all.
So it's a good question. It is a good question. I'm actually speaking with the Maltese chairperson of the Authority on Responsible Use of Cannabis tomorrow, Mariella Dimek, and she's a psychotherapist with like 20 years experience. She runs a private clinic in Malta, and she's on the committee with like 8 or 9 other similar typed, like well experienced professionals. And I reached out to her, and so we have a call tomorrow evening, like late her time, like evening time, Malta time. And if you guys want to maybe get back on a 3-way chat, Natalie and Martin, I think this format is quite good, because that's for me like a lot of these discussions at this stage, and at least for me, and I think like maybe a suggestion for the Martin's World platform will be just to I know there's the news segment. It's often negative news, but can we just look forward to like how can people prepare? How can your audience prepare? How can the community prepare for what's inevitably coming? And that's social club models, that's community peer-to-peer supply, that safe supply. I think all these things are really important. And particularly like Portugal and Malta and Germany now would be 3 places that we could easily rely on the contacts that we have to bring people in, or to, have these kind of updates and conversations, because otherwise these get very frustrating. I feel like if there's no what next, or no organizing, or no, what does even a regulated market design look like for Europe? I think these are things, and Malta are now the president of the EU. So that's kind of interesting that at the same time that the authority has been set up, they're now the president of the EU. So they can't get any slack from the higher ups to say, oh, you got to pull that policy because, that's not in the interest of Europe. There will be nobody objecting to Malta for the next number of years, with this cannabis thing. So we have to get that right. And if we communicate that to your audience, Martin, and to the wider population, I think that would be something positive. So I don't know what time suits you guys to do this again.
I'm more than happy to open up discussion anyway on that one. I'm make myself available anytime you need, G.
I have my lunch breaks in the evenings. Give me a shout. Speaking of lunch breaks, I have to go because I need to have a cup of tea before I actually get back to work.
Natalie, I really appreciate taking the time out of your day, and it's been great to be able to see and chat with you this afternoon, and we look forward to catching up in the not too distant future again.
My pleasure, folks. See you, everybody.
Bye, Natalie.
Bye.
See you, Natalie.
But yeah, no, I'd be definitely open to further discussions there, and I think that's a great idea as well, as not just to be focusing in on the present, but it's just looking forward and how best we can prepare not just ourselves but the community around us as to what is inevitably going to come, and what how best we can get there, have a desired outcome, and how best we can navigate this bloody ship there. Because I don't know if you're paying attention at all, but over in America at the moment, it seems like that the floor is falling out from underneath the market. The wholesale price of cannabis is going down. It seems like companies now are scrambling to downsize and to try to sell even what they have and declare the debts that they've incurred in order to try to get their business up and running. But it seems like the cannabis industry is it's kind of falling apart over there. It's been wrecked as well by big money coming in, buying up places. So I definitely think this kind of ground up approach is much more and kind of not profit orientated, more orientated about quality cannabis, consistent quality, affordable quality too.
Yeah, I mean, where nothing's falling apart is Spain, and the cannabis clubs there are doing absolutely fine.
Yeah.
There is no shortage of demand. There's no shortage of supply. You can't blame one or the other. And the pricing is generally, I mean, if you look at Uruguay, who are like I think really like the first country to legalize and regulate social clubs was Uruguay in 2012. And there, the cost of 1 gram of cannabis dried premium flower is $1, which is considered expensive.
Yeah.
It's considered expensive. That's for high quality. In the US, you can get cheaper. Cannabis has come down a lot in price. But with that, there's also a fall in quality. And a lot of these companies were propped up by, artificial stocks that they ran first on the Canadian stock market and more recently on the NASDAQ, since federal decriminalization in the US now allows more of this kind of like Wall Street type of money that can now come into it, because otherwise there's a contradiction. You have something illegal, but Wall Street can invest in it. Doesn't make any sense. So they started with the Canadian stock market. And if you look at a company like Tilray, who, we accepted sponsorship to come over in 2016 to sponsor the Global Medical Cannabis Summit, along with a number of other suppliers, including Bedrocan and a number of others who were also present there. If you look at, they essentially were just marketing their brand to all these governments. But what they didn't realize was like cannabis isn't legal outside of Canada and North America. So their market was very, very small. But by going to these countries and talking to these governments, they could tell investors, oh, well, we're in the process of getting a license for, okay, finally, I think they will be, a Tilray product will be on the Irish market this year. I think that is something to be happy about. I'm not at all complaining about that. If anything, it's great that, we were one of the first to introduce Tilray to the HPRA and the regulators. But what they did simultaneously by launching themselves on the stock market, people were making more money on the stocks than they've ever made selling cannabis. And you have employees there who were founding members at the beginning who got obviously compensation through stocks as well as a salary. They also got paid in stock. Yeah. The share price of what they were paid has now gone up to millions and millions and millions. I think sometime around 2018, it just peaked and rallied. And what do you do when you become a millionaire overnight? Apparently from the inner workings of the company, you stop going to work. So they were literally these like master growers, chief, everything. and they were going to work 1 day a week, from 5, 6, 7 days a week to 1 day a week after they went public. So I think a company that goes public, it's disastrous for your company. You will never survive. You will have a very quick pump. And I think now Aurora are probably the only ones left who haven't like died from their big pump in 2008. Yeah. I think they're somewhat surviving. But it does seem like Tilray are like going to be on the bottom, but, like for the rest of their existence.
They had to be bought out not too long ago, weren't they? They were bought out by Afria. I think that's the name of it.
There was a merge. Sorry, a merge there. Yeah. But that's exactly what happens, Martin.
Yeah, they shut down a number of their facilities.
Set up a startup.
Oh, go on, sorry.
Of course they did, because they're not making them. Of course they are. That's exactly what happens. So you have a quick pump, and everyone sells their share at the top, and they cash out, and now they have to forever reconcile that loss of income. The money's not on the table anymore. So now they're shutting down the things that they were propping up to set up. We have a number of facilities around the world, whatever it is, 9 facilities or whatever, and then they get that top share price. Okay, now we'll dump our shares, and those facilities, they're not as important to us anymore because we make more money from the stocks than we do the cannabis. So we'll shut down all the cannabis facilities, and when when we want to pump the stock again, which I think has actually happened this week, when we want to pump the stock again, we'll come out with more positive news to get more shareholders involved, and then we'll wait another few months before we'll just drop it again. Yeah. It's going to be very inconsistent if we keep relying on brands that are publicly traded, because they're at the mercy of Wall Street type investors who obviously don't have any interest at heart and are literally only there to play a market of profit and loss, and they're interested in profit and minimizing the loss. So that's all kind of the industry of cannabis amounted to in North America for me, and I think that's very disappointing. I think we can do a lot better than that, and yeah, certainly non-profit groups in Uruguay and Spain, while they don't make valuations of billion-dollar companies, they're well equipped and well, able to supply their local community. And you could have one small island of, say, like Lanzarote, and there could be 200 clubs on a tiny island like Lanzarote, each fulfilling the supply to 200, 500, 1,000, maybe 2,000 members. Fine, and there's no reason then to scale up and for one monopoly to come out of those 200 clubs operating in Lanzarote. They're all very happy to work in their own kind of club, but also collaborate with other ones and understand who. And of course they talk, some are better than others, and you get to know very quickly which are the clubs that actually put premium cannabis products forward, and which are the clubs that are possibly interested in profit and call themselves a non-profit but clearly operate more like, and there's nothing wrong with running like a business, I think that's fine, but it's like running like to maximize profits with the expectation to go public like North American companies. It's like a self-implosion. Like they did it to themselves. Nobody did it to them, and like they had a lot more to lose as well in 2016 with Justin Trudeau's legalization. Like that was a pivotal moment to get right, and they didn't get it right. They got it wrong, and they put every chief police and every former Labor a politician are the ones sitting on the boards and getting paid in shares from these companies. They didn't care when they were in office, but suddenly they care about cannabis when it becomes an industry. I'm not interested in an industry of cannabis. I'm not interested in the money or business of cannabis. While I think organizing and collectively, we do need to have a safe supply, and that should come in the form of social clubs first. And yeah, I mean, as Spain proved, you don't even need to wait for the law to change. You can just do this. 2 people, 4 people, 6 people, and you are a club. Like if someone's growing for those members, you don't need to be a global multi-billion-dollar player to have a seat on the table or to be involved in the so-called industry. So yeah, like it did kind of implode in North America. You're right, and I think that's the reason why. And I think they're going to have a very hard time now coming back from that to regain the trust from the people, the consumers, the shareholders, and everyone involved. They're going to have the hardest time actually to kind of come back. But yeah, the falling prices, farmers now have no incentive to grow cannabis in California because they have no money to afford that. The cost of the pound or the kilo is going way down, like below $1,000 to like a couple $100 for a kilo. That's fine when you've agreed, like in Uruguay or Spain, that this is non-profit and you're really growing to disseminate to the number of members that you have. So you should only grow. But instead they were told, no, this is a capitalist market, grow as much as you can and you sell that as high as you can. That doesn't work then because you now have no buyers because your buyers have gone to the cheapest guy and you have no members because you're not a club. There's no membership club. And now they're fighting for lounges because they forgot that when you dispense cannabis, you're also supposed to consume it. And there was no laws put in place for safe consumption. There was no laws to say that you can legally consume on the street. You have to only consume in private places. So that's a huge policy reform that's happened now. Las Vegas have already opened like their first lounge, I think like last year or maybe sometime sooner. I think that's cool. But it's like Spain got this right like decades ago. The lounge was your dispensary. Your dispensary was your lounge. You did the two things, the two activities in the one place. That makes sense. I think that's what Malta are going to do. I'll find out more tomorrow. If you have any questions that you want put to the chair, or if your audience do, just type them in the.
One I have straight away is the numbers, that the limits. It's how do they construct them? Where do they come from? What's the grounding for the numbers? Are they just arbitrary? They're just simply because they needed a limit and it sounded right, because that's what it would feel like to me, that it's like it's something that sounded right. It's like it appeases the prohibitionist mindset, whereas it's really I would want to see some hard science to say, hey, look, if we limit the number and the amount of the cannabis, look, this is showing that that's going to reduce harm. But they don't have that, do they? It's just it's fearmongering kind of a background.
Well, it's relying a lot on personal stories of people who were criminalized for like such small amounts of possession. So there's a lot of stories that are running now in the media in Malta around like someone who was caught with 4 plants 10 years ago, and they're still having to sign on to the local police station to this day. Jesus. They still have to declare this to their employer. They still are getting the penalty, and their families are distraught and their relationships are, so they're focusing in on a lot of these similar kind of stories as the decriminalization campaign, which is, well, we can't do everything in one go. There's already a lot of opposition against us. Like the government didn't ask for a referendum on this. They just did this. And, they've got a huge amount of opposition from like the church-based organizations across Europe, drug rehabilitation services. I don't know of even a few medical doctors like in Ireland, maybe have come against them. So they're very much trying to just keep it about, well, small, like personal consumption of up to, we have to give some limit to say that it's someone who's consuming. But I reckon circumstances will always be different for everybody. And I just hope that in their, like say, legal process in court, it's not just, oh, you had 5 plants, not 4, so you're a criminal, but the guy who had 4 plants before you isn't a criminal. I would hope that there's some way of differentiating, right? You have 5 plants or you have 50 plants, but clearly still that's for a particular reason. Like maybe you're making oil out of, and you need it, or you're juicing the cannabis leaves, and like clearly you need a hell of a lot of leaves to do that. Like 50 grams is just not going to produce you a hell of a lot. And if you're to grow 4 plants and only produce 50 grams, you're not a great grower either. So you're like, you've got to be like, if you're a good grower, you have 4 plants, like you could be getting like up to a kilo really if you're a great grower, but say at least 250 grams, like I'd say, out of 4 plants. Like it's almost like they're expecting balcony apartment grows of 4 plants that are going to be small, maybe auto flowering, but in reality we know like that.
But man, we're in Malta, like they've got an ideal climate. You be producing some nice plants, like if you've got a nice back garden there and a good watering system set up, like that'll be our only problem over there, is just keeping the babies there, the girls watered. Other than that, like you're going to do some tremendous growing, and 50 grams is going to be a serious problem to stay under that. Like imagine some nice outdoor varieties there and those things like 12 foot bloody tall, fucking bigger than an oak tree, you know, big bushy things.
But that's another question I have. Is outdoor permitted?
Yeah.
Or is it only indoor? Or is
There
it
we
only
go.
outdoor and not indoor? I'm actually not clear about that, but I think either or. But I seen there was an article gone up there on Love in Malta. I think we met the guys out there as well, the journalists, and they put up like how to grow 4 plants. And the first thing was like, oh, you get yourself a light. And there was like, I went onto the website, and the LED lights, which I think are great, but like, it's like 1,200 euro for this LED light, 600 watt. And I'm like looking like Malta, like the sunshine. I'm looking at the weather in Malta. It's like uninterrupted sunshine for the next like 300 days. It's like, why are you promoting lights? Like clearly there's some like interest there to sell like Lumatex or whatever, but like you have the sun.
Yeah, that's it. That'll be a question, I suppose, is have the government thought of the environmental impacts of such a policy where a person's not free to use what God gives us as the bloody sun, the most cleanest form of energy we can harness, and the outdoor bloody ground as well in which to plant it upon, like, you know. I would wonder, have they considered that? Because if everybody's made grow indoors and you've got, like, you know, however many citizens across Malta are going to be using upwards of 1,000 watts there per hour, that's going to have a bit of an impact on the grid for one, and then as well, you know, on the environment. Then secondly, you know, well, maybe that should be first, the environment first and the grid second.
No, but true. I mean, they might have some like solar panel systems or something, but like even still, it's like
even those, like,
it's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah,
on their grid. Yeah,
it's great that you have solar panels and stuff like that, but if you're going to be wasting the cells within them, fueling a garden that could have been done outdoors anyway, you're converting an energy to one form to put it back into another form of energy to feed it back to the plant. It's just like unnecessarily creating middlemen, but that's what our government love doing, don't they?
You could solar panel your LED lights and put another solar panel on it under it to power the battery that powers the light. I'd be thinking about some crazy shit sometimes, Martin.
No, it's absolutely.
It's an experiment I'm going to try.
Excellent. Gurji, I'll have to be getting ready to go and collect Alexis from school there in the next 15 minutes. But it's been great to catch up with you, man. Do you have anything to add in there? Do you have any enlightenment for the audience out there? Of anything to bring our attention to that's happening over the next while?
I will tomorrow when I speak with the chair, Marilla Dumek, of the Malta Authority on Responsible Use of Cannabis. I will definitely have an update for you and your audience. As I say, let's make a regular thing of this. I think Natalie and yourself are like two, you know, very prominent influencer types now, you know, who are on the scene and like very, very active and on it. Like I wouldn't have known about this morning's meeting. Like it just slipped my. I'm just focusing on the future, like we were mentioning earlier. Just focusing on Malta now and other jurisdictions where change is like very much among us. So if there's any like things that I can do to just like relay any information that I'm learning from the ground across some of these other European countries, relay it back to you guys, you know, I'd be more than happy to deliver those updates, maybe as like a weekly show or a bi-weekly show. Evening time is good for me. Anytime really is kind of good. I think that would really like help develop just the kind of conversation about about this like topic that we all love and why we're all here to talk about, and that's cannabis and everything that goes with that. Pandora's box of freedom and liberation, and human rights, and I'd be more than happy to continually talk to you, man.
That's the job now. I look forward to that, so because we need more discussions to be having on this, and I think people are probably maybe sick of me, and it'd be nice to be able to hear more from Natalie outside of Twitter and stuff like that, because she's got some great contributions to make.
Natalie's great,
as well as yourself there then as well.
Natalie has a very once Natalie's finished her like FE1 like solicitor exams, I mean, she's a very bright future ahead of her and career that's going to be, you know, it's going to play a very important role, you know, to have like a legal solicitor, you know, that's come from the community and is then put into that position, you know, once she's finished her exams, which I think is anytime soon now, maybe like sometime this year. So I definitely think it's important to keep Natalie in, and I suppose anybody else that you might have. But I just think the three of us have worked very well there.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great, and I think it'd be nice to have, as you say, like a weekly or bi-weekly discussions, covering all aspects of it. Hopefully, more of the positive stuff. But I think it's good to have a place where people can come to get a breakdown as to what's happening, because it's very hard to follow everything that's going on. I only learned of that this committee meeting that was happening yesterday through Natalie. So we keep each other in the loop, but it's very easy for you to fall out of the loop. So it'd be great for us to maybe come up with maybe something new, something new that'll be the three of us or maybe others having that discussion there on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. And it'll be a great place for people to kind of come, and hopefully the community will grow even bigger then.
I think so, Martin. Yeah, because it becomes very frustrating, you know, just to like go through the motions of like this morning, for example, like without a follow-up call and talking about strategy and organizing, it does become it's easily very frustrating, and we don't want to burn people out. I think people have enough of like traumatic headlines to be worrying about. You know, we want to keep it like organized and productive. You know, we want to be productive rather than just reactionary as well. I think that's important. All right, man.
Come here, Graham. Thanks very much. And I have to go get herself. It's been a pleasure, man. And you're looking well. So keep on looking after yourself, and we'll catch you back here at another time. It's always anytime you want to come on, man. Just get in touch. The door is always open for you.
Thanks, Martin. Regards to the family. Listen, take care of yourself.
Thanks very much, man.
Good luck, everybody.
Catch you later. Look at him. We get that off the screen there now. But guys, again, Graham de Barra, Casa das Drogas over there on YouTube. Give him a follow. He's got some great videos over there on his YouTube channel. We're also joined by the great and wonderful Natalie O'Regan. You can follow her over on Twitter. I believe she's on Instagram as well. Always getting some great posts up there. And as well, I have to commend her there and thank her, because without her post yesterday about the meeting this morning, I would have been in the dark about it, so guys, give him a follow and stay up to date and all of that stuff. And as Graham said, hopefully maybe soon we might make this a weekly, bi-weekly discussion that happens between myself, Graham and Natalie, because I think the guys have got some great opinions there. And obviously Martin's World, myself, it's very much one-sided, so I'll be very delighted to have the contributions of two other minds and great minds too to the discussions. So keep an eye out for that, and hopefully something will come out of that very soon. But until then, guys, I'll be back with more 420 news on Friday, so stay tuned for that. But other than that, stay blazed out there, guys. Keep it lit. Much love and peace. Stay safe. Hopefully you don't ever appear on the 420 news as part of the news segments. Bye-bye, guys. Oh no. Sean.